And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Brian Driscoll. What day is it again, Brian?
It's Friday, free for all, baby.
Yeah, baby.
Vince's favorite day of the week. We were actually on WSBT last night. We were doing a radio show. Vince is sometimes is a co-host there. And I mentioned that we were doing the show today, and Vince literally yelled on live TV around South Bend area about favorite day of the week. So that is genuine. Vince's excitement about Friday Free for All is genuine. And I apologize for being late. I was having some microphone issues. I kept having to come in and out of the chat. But we are now ready to roll.
We are here. And for once, it wasn't my fault. So
for once, yes.
Put it out there. Just because I already saw some people chatting about the fact that it was probably my fault. So
yeah, this once, not your
and I'll take it, and I'm going to run with it.
Yes.
So let's just jump right in, Brian. We had a question offline.
We had a super chat to begin before the show even started.
Good call.
Can't forget about DJ on that one, Vince. Come on,
DJ Wilson, dropping it like it's hot, my friend. Thank you so much. He says, excited about the defense, but there could be some growing pains. Do you feel the offense could carry an early game if needed? I feel the opposite. I feel like there might be some growing pains offensively, and the defense might have to carry the offense early. But I mean, I could be wrong on that. I think the offense has the ability to carry in an early game, especially with what the early games are. So I guess I'm not as worried about it, but I feel like there's going to be more growing pains offensively than there will be defensively.
I think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains on both sides of the ball at certain positions. Obviously, offensively, offensive line, defensively, secondary, I think there might be some growing pains. But I guess I'm just not as concerned about that stuff early on. And this is a very good question because I think the focus of the defense is not only has Notre Dame lost players. You say, well, they've lost players in the past and they've kept on rolling. But now you lost players and you lost a defensive coordinator, so maybe there's still some uncertainty about what Marcus Freeman can bring to the table, especially from people who honestly haven't watched a lot of Cincinnati football, which I understand. That's certainly. I didn't watch a ton of Cincinnati last year. I watched enough to feel like I could tell their defense is doing some good things, and I'm a big Mike Denbrock fan, so I always try to pay attention. But I didn't like break it down. But then after, of course, when the offseason's over, and I know Clark Lee is leaving, you dive into some Marcus Freeman film and you see, wow, this guy's really, really good.
Yes. But
I understand that those question marks because, again, he did it at Cincinnati. Now he's got to prove it at Notre Dame. I think that's a fair thing to say about anybody that comes.
No doubt.
So, but you look at, okay, well, Cam Hart steps into the starting lineup at corner. He's an unproven commodity. You don't know what's going to be playing besides Kyle Hamilton. Houston Griffith has played a little bit, but he's never had to have a full-time role. There's no Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah to rescue the front seven. You lose Dalen Hayes and Adi Ogundiji, which were key parts of two playoff teams. So I get it. I get that. But I just feel like there's enough continuity in the front seven. You have a star like Kyle Hamilton. You have some experience returning at corner. And I think the other thing, too, is I look at the other part of this, DJ, for me, is I look at matchups and which side of the ball is facing the tougher matchups earlier. So to your point, while I would agree with Vince that I think the defense should carry the day early, I think one thing working in the offense's advantage is they're playing some really bad defenses early in the season.
Good point.
And I'm actually going to have an article about this at Irish Breakdown as we kind of dive into, we're doing our countdown to kickoff, and we've done quarterback stuff. I had a defensive preview yesterday, but you look at the defenses defensive ends. Excuse me. You look at the defenses that Notre Dame is going to be facing early in the year. And it is not good until you get to Wisconsin in Game 4.
Right.
But if you look at Florida State last year, they gave up 36 points a game. They were at 27.8 the year before that, 31.5 the year before that, and they lost most of their best players. Purdue last year gave up 29.8 points per game and gave up, 27, 34, 37, and 37 in their last two games to Rutgers and Nebraska.
Yeah.
2019, they gave up 30.6 points per game. And then Toledo last year gave up 24.3 points per game against 6 MAC teams. And that included holding BG to Bowling Green to 3 points. Their next 5 games, they gave up 41, 28, 27, 24, and 23 points. And then the year before that, in a full season, they gave up 32 points per game. So Notre Dame's offense may be able to carry the team early. Now, I don't say carry, but maybe put up better numbers than maybe even their play might suggest. Maybe because
of the defenses.
Right. Right. Whereas offensively, I think Notre Dame's defense is facing better offenses early. You look at Florida State, they're going to have some athletes. Mackenzie Milton, I loved him at Central Florida. There's some good players there. When you look at Toledo, they've got a running back coming back next year that's got well over 2,000 yards rushing in his career so far. I'm going to pull up his name. I think let me see this kid's name, because I was actually breaking it down the other day, and I kept forgetting his name. It's Bryant Kobach. And in 2019, Brian Kobach rushed for 1,187 yards and averaged 6.1 yards per carry and 12 touchdowns. And he ran for 917 yards and 14 touchdowns the year before that. And then he'll be back. So he'll be part of what they're doing too. And then, of course, Purdue, we've talked about this. They've got David Bell at wide receiver. They're going to have, I think King DeRue is going to be back at running back, although he was hurt. They have the Horvath kid at running back. They're going to have some talent at receiver. Plummer comes back after getting some starts last year at quarterback. So I think offensively, I think the defense is going to be challenged more early in the season than the offense is. So to DJ's question, I think there may be an opportunity for, if the defense does stub its toe a little bit early against some talented offenses, I think this offense may have to step up and play better than maybe people think. And honestly, I think it should. I don't think there's any excuse for this offense to need 4 or 5 games to get going. You've got a veteran quarterback that's led a team to a Rose Bowl. You've got, you lost 4 starting offensive linemen. You're going to you should have 4 guys on your offensive line that have started games in college football.
Yes.
Right? Because there's no excuse not to have Zeke Correll somewhere in the starting lineup, in my opinion.
Agreed.
You've got arguably the best tight end coming back in college football, a tight end depth chart that is the envy of just about everyone in college football not named Georgia. And you have a receiving core that's got plenty of experience. Now, no one's ever been the guy, but Avery Davis was a key part of last year's rotation. Braden Lindsey, when healthy in 2019, was a key part of what they're doing. Lawrence Keys was a key rotation player in 2019, made some big plays in wins over wins over Louisville, I wish, and then made a huge play to set up a score against Georgia. He's played in the bright lights. So, I mean, there's plenty of – and then, of course, running back. One of the 2 or 3 best running back depth charts in the country. So, if Tommy Rees is the coach, I hope he is and think he can be. And this Notre Dame coaching staff is as good as all these Notre Dame fans tell me. Jeff Quinn's one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Del Alexander did this, and this. If all these people that are telling me how great this offensive staff is, why should that unit struggle early in the year? There's no reason, in my opinion, especially when you consider how bad the defenses are. So I'm actually not someone who believes the offense is going to need 4 or 5 games to get going. I think they're going to need about a half. I think we could see a little sloppiness early in the first half against Florida State, because that always happens when you play a decent team in the opener. I think the Louisville in 2019, it took them about a half to kind of get going. And then once they got going, they kind of moved it pretty good. But I think maybe we see something like that in the opener. But after the opener, this offense should be cruising, in my opinion.
All right. Well, like I said, we have a question from offline that we want to get to before we get to the live questions. This one's from Iman. He says, would you take Notre Dame in 2015 with what you believe Marcus Freeman is capable of as the defensive coordinator, or Notre Dame in 2018 with Brady Quinn as the quarterback?
This is an easy one for me. It shouldn't be an easy one, because I love the premise of this question. Because we said the same thing about the 2015. I've said this about the 2015 team. If Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator on that staff, and they had the same defensive staff then that they had in 2018, I think Notre Dame would have had a shot to win a national title. I truly believe that. And if you were to tell me 2015 team with Marcus Freeman against the 2018 team as it is, I'm taking the 2015 team. Mm-hmm. But when you throw Brady Quinn in a quarterback, it's a different animal. Because here's the thing is, Brady was not the most accurate quarterback, but he was a winner. He was big. He was tough. And one of the things that benefited him was because of his lack of elite. I mean, he wasn't inaccurate like people say, but he wasn't like, Jimmy Clausen when it came to accuracy, right? But the thing about him is he had those big receivers, and he was more than willing to throw the ball up and give them a chance to go make plays.
Sure.
It's exactly what he would have had in 2018, and arguably a better version of it, to be honest with you. Now, obviously they didn't put up the numbers that Samardzija and Stovall put up because the offense was different. but you'd have had Brady. Think about Brady Quinn with a running game, Brady Quinn with a good offensive line, not great, but good offensive line, and two monsters on the outside that, with all due respect to Mo Stovall, who ran like a 4.5 something at the pro day, and Jeff Samardzija, who never would have got under a 4.5. You had 2 6'4" guys that could run 4.42s. Right. With Alize Mack at tight end, with Cole Kmet at tight end. I would have loved to have seen that. I mean, and Chris Fink to me was a better slot than Matt Shelton was back in 2005.
I'd agree with that.
And so you give him better weapons around him, and with all due respect to Darius Walker, Dexter Williams can actually, turn 20-yard runs into 80-yard runs, where Darius turned 80-yard runs into 30-yard runs. With his lack of speed. So I would have loved to have seen, and then you give him that 2018 defense. Yeah, I would have taken the Brady Quinn team. And that could just be my first dog, when my wife and I got our first dog, I named him Brady, right? So there could probably be some bias in there. You know what I mean? But I just think about that. Like, how good would Notre Dame have been back then if they would have had a better running, more explosive running backs and a better defense?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he would have had in 2018 is more explosive running backs and a way better defense. And he still would have had the Giants on the outside. Now look, Anthony Fasano was a lot better tight end than Alize Mack was, but Alize Mack was no bum by any stretch. And you had Cole Kmet, you had Brock White. So I would have loved to have seen Brady Quinn with that team. I would have liked, and I want to hear in the comments too. And I'm probably dooming us to not being able to get all the questions in because people are going to comment, which I don't care. I want to hear people's opinions. Which team would you take? Which team, Vince, which one would you take? And then I want to hear from our listeners of which team they would take.
Well, it's very interesting because I like the defense for the 2018 better. And then you're putting an elite quarterback.
Yeah, it's so much more depth on that 20. That 2015 defense had some studs on it. Jalen, Cole, Luke.
And
I would argue
if you put Marcus Freeman with that group, that makes them better. I mean,
I would argue the 2015 starters on defense were better than the 2018 starters, top to bottom. I think the biggest difference. There you go.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be tough for me to choose against Marcus Freeman. Now, granted, we've never seen him coach a game at Notre Dame. So some of it's conjecture, some of it's, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like he could have taken that starting group and made them pretty darn close to elite. Now, one of the things about Marcus Freeman is he likes to rotate guys in and out. That would have been a little bit more difficult because he wouldn't have had the depth.
But let's be honest, he's not rotating out Jalen Smith.
Exactly. You can want to rotate guys out.
Your point is accurate. I mean, that 2015 team did not have the depth that the 2018 team would have had.
Right.
And they wouldn't have had Brady Quinn. With all due respect to Deshaun Kaiser, if the game's on the line and it's Deshaun Kaiser or Brady Quinn, I'm going with Brady Quinn.
It's not even a consideration, to be perfectly honest with you. Brian, when I got kicked, I lost some of the early ones. I've got to 12:31 with Brandon.
Okay, so I'll try to get some of these. Jeff Fluke, Coach, thanks for the film review yesterday. Great job as always. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I assume that was you that left that question because I got a DM. Jeff was the one that asked about about the Brendan Vernon one, so that's why we watched the film. Joe Gallego says, with the understanding that Freeman maybe has 2 solid years at Notre Dame before getting a head coaching gig, do you see Notre Dame trying to sell him on the backfill for Kelly? I would have, if he's as good as I think we all think he's going to be,
as good as advertised, yes.
Then yes, I think they would be smart to try to say, hey, look, you're going to be the replacement for Brian Kelly.
And if they don't even approach the conversation, I think that's a problem. You know what I mean?
But I don't want to go to the negative because we don't know if he hasn't coached the game yet. So there should be no approaching yet. Right. So I don't want to go there yet, but Jack Swarbrick's a pretty savvy guy. And I think if he sees a situation where Marcus Freeman is doing what we all think he can do, it would be wise to sort of have a line of succession, because this thing I've said before is, when you're really rolling, and let's just say Notre Dame continues doing what they've been doing for the next 3 years, right? No national title, but they're going to make one playoff appearance in the next. Let's say they don't make it this year, they go 11-2, don't make the playoff. Next year they make a playoff appearance. 2023 they don't, but it's another 10-3, 11-2 season. You're rolling. Do you really want to break that up and go hire someone from the outside?
Completely different.
Now, it may be the right decision ultimately. I mean, depending on who's out there, but that can be challenging. Say, hey, look, we've got a good thing going here. Do we really want to roll the dice? Because, yeah, we're rolling the dice by hiring a guy that's never been a head coach before.
Sure.
But you're rolling the dice knowing he's going to keep most of the infrastructure in place. That's the thing.
And he's been on the inside. He sees what is going on a day-to-day basis. That's keeping this thing rolling. I would also, if I'm Jack Swarbrick / Brian Kelly, and look, Brian Kelly may not be making his plans for a succession. I don't know what his thought process is on that, but I would make Marcus Freeman available to the media a little bit more often. Let him kind of dip his toe in. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's Brian Kelly's decision, and I don't see Brian Kelly.
I know. I know.
Brian Kelly likes to be the face in front of the camera.
Yes, he does. There's no question about that. But that's what I would like to see. Pipe dream, yes, but at least see what he can do in front of cameras, and because he's been amazing when we talked to him.
I would say this, though. If I was going to do that with Marcus Freeman, I am very much against doing that publicly. I am very much against the public coach in waiting, because that can create issues in your coaching staff. If a defensive player is getting jumped on by Brian Kelly, well, you're not even a head coach anyway. Coach,
you're right.
Do it between the three of you.
Absolutely.
If you're Swarbrick, you sit down with Marcus and Brian and say, hey, look, here's the deal, Brian. You talk to Coach Kelly first. You don't sit them down together, but you talk to Coach Kelly first, make sure he's cool with it.
Right.
And then if he's on board, then you do it together. You don't necessarily do it because, hey, here's the pay raise, here's the structure, here's the deal, here's how it's going to work. And then you go from there. But I don't like the public doing it, because it can create, well, who's my true guy? Who's my true leader? Especially for veterans, it wouldn't matter as much, but for younger players.
Sure. And the recruiting trail and all that stuff.
And then, of course, the media is going to talk a lot about it. And then there's going to be more demand for Marcus. You just want as few distractions as possible.
Agreed.
So it's something I would do behind the scenes. I would not announce it. I would just say, hey, look, here's the deal. Here's what we're going to do.
But similar to what the women's basketball program did.
And I would even say to Marcus, like, listen, if teams reach out to you about becoming a head coach, take the interview. You know what I mean? If you want, or at least leak that they're reaching out, because I think there can be some advantages to thinking your replacement is going to be staying. Hey, look, he stayed at Notre Dame. He turned down this because, this job at so-and-so because he wanted to stay at Notre Dame. That could be a really big. So that's another reason I would keep it kind of under wraps, to be honest with you.
Makes sense.
Travis Miner says, this is a good one, but you got me because he read my mind, Vince. He knew what guy I was going to say. What former Notre Dame player not named Rocket do you think would be a bigger star in the modern game than they were when they played? And that's an easy answer for me, with or without Rocket in there, Vince. But what is your answer?
Oh, man.
That's that one. So if you have to think about it, you want me to go ahead and answer first?
Yeah, please do.
Ricky Waters, because he was such a great receiver. Ricky Waters was a modern back playing in an era where his ability to catch the ball and run and be explosive was not appreciated as much as it would be today. Ricky Waters would be a top 3 running back in the modern NFL, I believe, because he was a really good runner, but he's a really good pass catcher. I mean, he lined up a receiver for Notre Dame in 1988 when they won the title.
Yeah,
think about that. Notre Dame, 2 of Notre Dame's top two receivers in 1988 were Ricky Waters and Rocket. Mark Green and Anthony Johnson. And, Mark Green was a running back, and Tony Brooks were the running backs in 1988. And then you had Anthony Johnson at fullback and Braxton Banks at fullback. So, I mean, you put Ricky Waters in today's game, to me, he's got Josh Adams type explosiveness. Maybe he wasn't quite the, home run threat, but he had that kind of long stride. But then he brings sort of Kyron Williams pass catching skills to the table in a much bigger body. So Ricky Waters would be the guy for me. I think Ricky Waters would be phenomenal in a modern offense.
Can I go with a guy? It's not really the modern game, but it's more like the way I was looking at this was like with social media and things like that, like how they would be a bigger star if that was around, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of a guy like Chris Zorich and his personality.
He would really fit Marcus Freeman's defense too, because it's an attacking, penetrating defense.
Absolutely. So, but I think if social media was around, I think he would have been a personality that everybody would have known about. Because it would have complemented his play on the field, obviously. And then, of course, he went on to have a good, NFL career, et cetera. So that'll be mine.
And, I said it was an easy answer for me, but as soon as I got done talking about Ricky Waters, I started thinking about Tim Brown. You know what I mean? Like, you put a guy like that could return and catch and run routes and had home run speed in a modern offense. How many bubble screens and look screens and stuff like that would Tim Brown have caught?
Right.
That's another one. But he was a little bit before my time of being really, truly able to appreciate players. I was like 9 when he was in his last year.
Sure.
I remember him more as a Raider than I do as a Notre Dame player, just because of my age and things like that. But yeah, those two are the first two that come to my mind.
It's a good question.
Rocket. That's a very good question. Coleman Smith asks, which one of the senior receivers do you think will be the number one option? So since we're talking seniors, we'll go fifth year and seniors. So we'll go Avery Davis, Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey, Lawrence Keys, Joe Wilkins. So Vince, which one of the senior receivers do you think will be the number one option? And you can say none of the above.
Right. Well, are we going on the premise that everybody's healthy, right? So,
everyone's healthy in a realistic manner. We can't expect Kevin Austin to be healthy enough to where he's going to play 80 snaps from the first game of the year. We have to be realistic.
If everybody's healthy, it's Kevin Austin for me. I think realistically, my answer is going to be Avery Davis, though. What actually does take place, if we're talking about this, 6 months from now, I'm going to say Avery Davis.
I don't think any of them are going to be the number one receiver. I think it's going to be Michael Mayer. Yeah. I think Michael Mayer is going to be the alpha in this group. And I think, to me, I don't think you necessarily need a number one. I know that everybody looks at that because that's how it's been for Notre Dame for so many years. Yeah. You've had that number one guy. But I really think this needs to be more about running the offense and Jack Cohn reading the defense.
Not
and
worrying Notre Dame, you're throwing it.
Yeah, and then Tommy Rees being able to say, hey, look, what's some weeks the matchup that you really want to exploit is going to be Kevin Austin or Deion Colsey or a bigger receiver. Some weeks it's going to want to be Braden. Hey, they got a slow corner that plays off coverage. Braden Lindsey can just run by this guy all day, or it may be a deal where we've got this kid that's just, he's got tight hips, and if we get a good route runner out there, we can dominate this kid. So maybe you want to go with Lawrence Keys that week. I think it's going to be matchup dependent, but it's more about, hey, Jack, you don't have to have a guy. Read the flipping defense and get the ball where it's going to need to go. We don't have to force feed it to a guy at receiver. I think what you want to do, however, is you're going to say, hey, look, if we're not designing at least 5 touches for Michael Mayer every game, then we're not good coaches.
Yeah.
And if he's not getting 5 touches, it's because the defense so overplayed him that you're going to throw for 350 yards and he's only going to have 4 catches for 29 yards. That's okay because they had to overplay him, and so you're just throwing it over their head all day. And you're running bootlegs away from them and stuff like that. So I think that would be my answer to that. Brandon asks, guys, should I be worried about this weather affecting these visits this weekend? How much of a factor do you say weather can play in a recruit's official visit? I don't think this kind of weather is going to be a problem. I think the only time of weather, for example, Zach Rice is from Virginia. I'm from Virginia. Trust me, Zach Rice he lives in the mountains of West Virginia, Lynchburg, right? He's seen rain before, right? He's used to rain. You look at Ashton Craig, it won't be an issue. He's from Indiana. He's used to this kind of weather. CJ Williams is from LA. If he doesn't want to go somewhere where it doesn't rain, how do you fix that one? It rains in LA, right? It rains in Texas. It rains in Alabama. It's not cold. It's just wet. And I don't think that's going to affect it. I don't think it's going to be an issue. And if it is an issue, that kid was never come to Notre Dame anyway.
If rain was an issue,
this weekend, then he's looking for a reason not to come to Notre Dame. So I think things like that. We've talked about this. Manti Te'o was so cold during his visit that he went into the locker room at halftime of a game where Notre Dame lost to a 2-8 team that had just fired their coach, and they were throwing snowballs at the players, and he still picked Notre Dame. Right? Most of these kids are really smart and savvy kids. They've got good guidance. They understand there's a lot more to it than it happened to rain this weekend, and so I don't think it'll be an issue at this point in time. Coleman Smith says, what role do y'all see Isaiah Pryor fitting into this year? You want to start with that one, Vince?
Yeah. Well, he's not going to be a starter just because of his coverage inability, I guess is the best way to put that. So, but I could see him having a role, say, against Navy, against maybe a Wisconsin, maybe a Cincinnati, a team that wants to run the ball, because he's a downhill player, and he's a rover now. He practiced at Rover all last year, so he's not a safety anymore. I know some people still think,
and he looks like he might not even be a rover anymore. I saw a picture of them working out yesterday.
Be a middle linebacker,
jacked up. He looks good.
Yeah.
He looks good.
They're going to find a way to get him on the field.
You have to.
And the depth that they have will allow him to get on the
Right.
field in certain packages, right? I mean, that's
Right.
that's where depth helps you,
And
because
not ask him to do things he can't do.
you can
Right.
mask certain areas of a kid who, maybe he's not as good at something, right? So you're not going to put him in a position to be covering guys in space,
Right.
because that's not what he's good at. But you're going to put him in a position to be coming downhill, to be filling, things like that in the run game, et cetera. So I do think there's going to be a role for him. It's probably not going to be as a starter unless it's, sometimes there's a different linebacker that starts against Navy. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing. But he's not going to be an everyday starter. But they'll find a role for him. I do truly believe that.
Mm-hmm. Coleman Smith asks, "Is there an update on Snead?" There's not going to be an update on Jalen Snead until he makes his public commitment. Do. Okay, yeah. There's just I don't know what else I can say about that one. I mean, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it, Vince.
You want to say it?
I'm not going to say it.
I can see it right on you.
I'm not going to say it. Okay. Notre Dame's in a great shot position there, and I don't see that changing. And then just let it play out. Okay, let it play out. I had to say it. If I didn't say it, I was going to start like Tyrone Bigham's in the middle of the show. I had to say it. Liam Gaming, when Madden was brought in, would they have done drills with him, i.e. agility, because you said he may have been coached to be heavy-footed? I'm not saying he was coached, and you did say may have been. So, I mean, you did read that correctly. I think they're going to do agility drills with him regardless.
But they wouldn't have done it before he came in. It wasn't
right. It's going to start once they do the summer workout. I mean, they see the film. Right. They see the film. They know who he is. And then you just hope that you can be pleasantly surprised. But no, they're definitely going to work on agilities, change the direction, things like that. But they do that with all the linemen at this point in time. I think for him, it's going to, look, that was my wishful thinking comment. I don't think he was taught to be I think he was taught to play in a tight space. I don't think he was necessarily taught to play heavy-footed. And I've seen him struggle enough with twists to say this kid's just not an overly athletic player. But he's big and strong and physical, and hopefully he's very fundamentally sound, which I thought he was at Marshall. That's the one thing I did think he was on film. He was definitely powerful, but he didn't make a lot of mistakes, which I thought was pretty good. So he's a good player. Jojo Pineda, hey guys, happy Friday. Happy Friday to you as well, Jojo. We have Mickey treading for Morrison, Moore, and maybe Bellamy. Do we take Pope and Nwankpa if a take is a take if he comes? So 6 DBs. So not all three of those corners they're trending for right now. I still like where they are with Devin Moore, and I really like where they are with Jaden Bellamy. Things aren't going as well with Benjamin Morrison right now. So they're going to need to pull off a little bit of a comeback on that one if they're going to get him in the class. But yes, I do think they'd take all 6 of those guys if they all wanted to come. I do. I don't think they're going to get all 6. The hope is that they get at least 4, and 5 is the ideal number. I think the right now the 2 that I think Notre Dame's going to have the hardest time landing right now is Morrison and Xavier Nwankpa, which just shows how much this stuff can change. But I still like where they are with Xavier Nwankpa. They just got to close. Yeah. But I mean, to me, he's not. They're in a good place. They got to finish with him, but it's not the same situation as like with Moore and Bellamy. I think they're in a much, much bigger position there. Brandon says, Brian, do you have any intel or anything about Notre Dame upgrading their nutrition and injury recovery program similar to programs like Alabama, Oklahoma, et cetera? So I'm still trying to get some more information on this, Brandon, but I have reached out to a couple people when they hired the new nutritionist. And I said, okay, is this just a situation where, this is just hiring someone to replace somebody that left? Or is this a situation where you're looking to upgrade? And so what I was told is that this is going to be an upgrade, and I'm going to try to find that comment that I had and see if I can't find it, but basically what I was told is this is a situation where they're looking to upgrade, and I mean you do have a replacement, but the part of the search involves someone who is going to be able to upgrade and improve that part of the program, which is to me one of the most glaring weaknesses that I've seen. Even up until last year, from what I was told from my sources, is there are players who have friends or high school teammates that played at other big time programs, and they would talk. I mean, these kids talk. And they're like, man, I wish we had that. I wish we did this. I wish we had that many meals provided to us by the football program. I mean, there are some programs like Bama where just about every meal is determined by the nutrition people. Right. Notre Dame doesn't have that right now.
Well, and they have like a kitchen-ish type place in the Goog, but
that was part of it.
It's not great at the present. And from what I understand, the renovation is going to provide a actual kitchen where they can provide food and things of that nature from the Goog. Right now, all that food is brought in from like the dining hall, etc.
It's like in a big truck.
In a big truck, in a big heated or cooled truck, depending on what it is, right? And then they do it in like they feed them in like the just the greeting area up the stairs there. It's just right there at the top of the stairs. That's where they grab their food. And it's like a grab and go situation. And then they eat it in the auditorium kind of thing. So they don't really have an eating area in the Goog right now. And they don't have a kitchen where they can prepare food.
I thought they had that one dining. I've seen them eat it. That it can't hold the whole team, but
it's a multi-purpose room. Let's put it that way. From the way that I've understood it to be when I went through there. So they're looking to expand that. Let's just put it that way.
That'd be good.
And I haven't seen the plans for it or anything, but that's what I've been told. So
yeah, I don't think Brian Kelly is like, oh wow, we don't have the same nutrition program as other places. Wow, that's odd. But there are logistics that go into this, and there are finances and resources that go into this, and it's just part of the growth of the program. I think he was later in reacting to that than he should have been. But that was all part of the whole, post 2016 thing where he wasn't as tuned into what the needs were of the program and had gotten distracted with some other things that were going on in the program, and we saw what happened. But I don't think that part of it has improved, not as fast as I would like.
Sure,
but it is improving. And Brandon said the reason for the question was he saw an article about a recruit's visit to Bama, and he was super impressed by the technology, upgrades, and commitment to the nutrition and body injury recovery part of their facilities. Agree. And Notre Dame is not up to that level yet.
Yeah.
But they're working. The problem is when they make the improvement, Vince, they're going to have to make a big jump.
Yes.
Not like, okay, now you are where Alabama was 4 years ago. You need to go from here you are to we're with everybody else.
Otherwise, you're just going to keep getting passed
and they've
up
done that. I mean, Brian Kelly's talked about like those like sleep chambers things that they have. Like some of that injury recovery stuff, Notre Dame's they are doing that. That's something and I think that's something it's not a coincidence in the last couple of years since that has been a part of what they're doing that Notre Dame has been so good in November.
Sure,
that's not a coincidence,
right?
And I think that's something that Brian Kelly and Matt Bayless and the Trent Rob Hunt, whoever is involved in those decisions, I think those things are important because that is why I believe Notre Dame has been able to, maybe not have quite as many injuries late in the years. They had a couple bad breaks in on the offensive line, but overall they've stayed pretty healthy the last couple years, and they've been really good in November the last couple years. And I think those are reasons for that.
I am caught up with where you're at. Do you want to grab that super chat?
No, go for it.
I will grab it. Okay, I'm going down. There it is. All right, DeBeezy, thank you, sir, for the super chat. He says, Coach, not football related, but what is your favorite Tupac album? Totally judging your answer. Happy Friday.
You completely are. I'm going to be honest. I have had a lot of Tupac fans disagree with me on this one because he had so many good albums, but I don't want her to judge me.
It's coming.
All Eyes on Me is my favorite album. And I know he had some great ones in his earlier albums and all that kind of stuff were awesome. But All Eyes on Me just had so many albums or so many songs on it that I could relate to so well. And I think at the age I was when that album came out, I was a junior in high school. I was just in that phase, to me, that song to me was just that album to me. I mean, he had the America's Most Wanted with Snoop on there, and it was a 2-disc thing. That was back when the 2-disc thing was a big part of it. So that one was mine. So you can judge me all you want, but that one was mine. And I know that was kind of his West Coast time, and I didn't necessarily love that, but that was my, but honestly, did Tupac really make a bad album when he was alive? They had a couple that they put out when he died that were like, okay, there's a reason they didn't release that song on any previous album, you know what I mean? But that was probably my favorite. That's probably my favorite. And then JoJo says, if Coach Q needs help to close, that's Coach Quinn, Couldn't Kelly assist with Reese to help in closing if we just get Shrouth, Craig to go with Chan and Tenota? Would you be okay with that? If not, I'm not, but it is what it is. If they got Shrouth to go with Craig with Chan and Tenota, I'm very happy with that finish. I think Billy Shrouth is a top 100 offensive lineman, whether he goes to Wisconsin or comes to Notre Dame. I think Joey Tenona is a top 150 caliber lineman. And then Ty Chan, I've said this, I can't really evaluate Ty Chan because there's so little film of him playing offensive line, and it's from his sophomore year where he was so fundamentally unsound. He didn't get to play as a junior because of COVID. Now he's put on like 40 pounds and he's bigger and stronger. So I need to see him, but people that have seen him say that he looks like $1 million. I did give Ty Chan a 4.5-star upside grade because you could see some of the upside. But even then, he's still a top 250 consensus player. And then Ashton Craig, I think, has a very high ceiling. So if they get that group, my beef would be it's a little light on definite tackles, but that's a really good 4-man group. Are there areas where the staff can still improve? Yes. But would that be a group that I'm going to be like, my concerns about Jeff Quinn are still there? Not as much, but then also part of that would be, how did they get Billy Shrouth? If they had to get Billy Shrouth back in the fold because of Brian Kelly and Tommy Reese stepping in, then my concerns about Jeff Quinn still exist. But at the end of the day, I don't really care who's involved in getting the kid here. Just get him here. That's going to be the key. Get the class here. Like I said, I don't care that Lance Taylor wasn't the primary reason that they got Logan Diggs. I just care that they got Logan Diggs in the class.
Exactly.
If Brian, and honestly, if Brian Kelly is part of the reason that they were able to get Billy Shrouth back into the class, that's a great thing, because 2 years ago, a year ago, that wouldn't have happened. So that's a positive. So yeah, would I be okay with that offensive line class? Absolutely. I'd be more than okay with it. I'd be kind of fired up. and then if they went and got Emil Wagner, then I'd even be more happy about getting Emil Wagner, because Wagner and Craig are both low ceiling, high floor guys. Mm-hmm. So if that was your 4-5, that'd be one heck of a class. But if you take Shrouth out and it's just Craig and Wagner, I got a lot of concerns, because now you've got Wagner, you've got Craig, you've got Chan, and you've got Joe Alt in the last two classes that are all kind of projects, and that's a few too many projects without enough proven entities. But if you throw Billy Shrouth into that mix, I don't know if you're going to have a better offensive line class in the country. I really don't.
All right, Brian, we got another super chat. We got to throw in Tatted Up Irishman. Thank you, sir. Says, can you guys talk about the beginning of the recruiting process for a kid? Does it start with camps or film? What age should a kid start those things?
It just depends on the player.
Everybody's different.
There are some kids who are getting looked at as 8th and 9th graders because they're just physically advanced and they're very skilled. I think for some kids, it's simply you played a big-time program and you were already on radar of programs because they saw you play as a sophomore when they were evaluating some other player. There are recruiting services, not like Rivals and 247 Sports, but just recruiting services who get paid. Right. Well, they're one. I don't know if they work with Division I teams, but they work with, like, we used to use them at the Division III level. Yeah. But there are other scouting services that will literally just send thousands of names to schools. Hey, and just blurbs. Here's the kid's contact info. Here's the head coach's contact info. All that kind of stuff. The advent of things like Huddle and Exo Sports has been so wonderful for programs, because literally every weekend I can send an email out to 30 coaches that has an upload of this kid's game film from the past week. And I can circle him every play. I can, if I'm the high school coach, I can do that. There's no excuse for high school coaches anymore to not get film out of kids, to just about every school in the country. Other times it's a kid will go to a camp at a young age and be spotted. Other kids get overlooked. Their film doesn't necessarily blow people away. Ashton Craig, we have an article that Blake Sofa did on irishbreakdown.com where he was talking to the head coach of Ashton Craig. And he said one thing that hurt Ashton, because we play out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they're like down on the border of Ohio. I mean, they play Ohio teams and stuff last year, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. I've never even heard of that high school. And I recruited. I was the recruiting coordinator for a school that recruited the state of Indiana, and I had never heard of Lawrenceburg. And so maybe that says more about me as a recruiting coordinator, but I never heard of it, right? And he didn't get a chance to go to camps last summer because those were all canceled. Coaches couldn't come to see them play in person. They couldn't get on campus to size this kid up. So he kind of went under the radar for a while. Well, now that he's getting out, Notre Dame got a chance to see him in person, and you're like, whoa, this kid's pretty good. Well, the reality is this kid probably would have camped at Notre Dame last year. He would have been on their radar. They would have been a little more keyed into him.
Sure.
And then maybe they would have been able to look at him sooner. So I think those are all parts of it too. And then, of course, kids go to another way that it works too is, so when I was at Division III school, so when I was at Muhlenberg College, or even when I was at Wittenberg, and when I was at not at Christopher Newport, because we were mostly an in-state program, but that was the only state school that I coached at. But when I was at Duquesne and different places, I would work the Maryland camp every summer because I recruited state of Maryland. So I'd go to the University of Maryland camp. And that's where I met James Franklin and Bill O'Brien and a lot of those guys, because during the Friesian era. But and James Franklin, I really liked. Bill O'Brien, I could go without him. Mike Loxley I met him too. He's a good guy. But the reason I was there was not, because it's like, hey, look, there's going to be a lot of kids that think they're Division I players that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be at the camp, give me a chance to work the camp, meet kids, see kids work out. I did when I did it at Bowling Green. That was the main reason I went down to Bowling Green that first year at the camp. Then I had a chance to meet Coach Mullen and Coach Meyer and all those guys, and then had a chance to spend some time around them, and that was a tremendous learning experience for me. But the primary reason I was there
recruiting
was to see kids. Yeah. And Tom Zibikowski was at one of the camps I went to, which is really funny. And there he looked like, so he kind of looks like, Tommy looked a little bit like Josh Hartnett. And there was another kid that he bonded with at the camp that kind of looked like Ben Affleck. So me and some of the other coaches like making fun of him that they looked like the dudes from Pearl Harbor. So that was pretty funny, but that's another thing that you do, and that's how a kid will get discovered.
That's huge, because that's from working camps and doing exactly what you just said to sending my kid to camps. One of the things that they have you do from the kid's side is they have you fill out a recruiting profile when you sign up for camp, and it asks for your GPA, it asks for all these different things, and then all those profiles go to every coach that is on that staff. And then they also send out a sheet that has every coach that is on staff and their contact info. So so I'm sending my kid to a Division I school to go to camp, but guess what? I don't think he's a Division I player, but I think there's coaches that are going to be there who I want my kid to get seen by, because it's those small NAIA, Division II, Division III. Those are the coaches that I want my kid to get seen by. Right. Great if he gets seen by a Division I coach, but there's also reality. You send your kids to those camps to get seen by all of those coaches. And that's the point.
I will say this as a college coach. The one thing that I would always recommend to parents, if there's any parents that think they might have a student that can be good enough to play in college somewhere, you handle that part. Let your kid go to these camps to learn and compete.
Absolutely.
Do not put the pressure of, you got to go there and ball out and get a scholarship, right? That's on you, not him, right? Or her, because it's the same thing for girls. Let them go to the camp with the thought of, I'm going to learn from college coaches. I'm going to compete and prove and show myself out and evaluate myself compared to other players. Do not put that burden on them of, you got to go there and you got to earn that scholarship, unless it's a school saying, hey, we like you. We want to come work you out, and if things go well,
that's different.
But especially when they're young, it should all be about learning the game
and having fun. It's a camp.
Right?
Go and have fun.
Yes, compete, learn, battle, but don't put that burden of your success is going to determine your future, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're good enough, someone will find them if they get enough exposure. But let you handle that. You send out 1 million film emails. Mm-hmm. You send out 1 million clips. Have your high school coach help you with that.
Absolutely.
But for the kid, it should be about playing the game, learning, and competing. Not about the pressure of that. That would be my 2 cents. I mean, again, I'm not telling people how to raise kids. Vince and I were joking before the show. If my children, I just let them go outside in the back and go to the bathroom. You can't do that because mine have 3 and 4 legs. You have 2, and that would be child abuse. So I'm not trying to tell you how to parent. I'm just telling you from a coach's standpoint. I've seen so many kids go to these camps, and their parents put this burden of scholarship on them that it's like you could just see like they're ready to jump out of their skin.
They're totally stressed out,
and they don't learn anything from it.
And you're not going to compete at a high level when you're stressed out. That's just a fact. Yeah. That's just a fact. You got to be loose. You got to be willing to learn. And from a coach's standpoint, I realize we're getting off tangent here, but from a coach's standpoint, I want a kid that wants to learn. Like, that's the kid that I want to recruit, a kid that's going to look me in the eye. He's going to listen to what I'm saying, and then he's going to apply it on the field, right? Or on the court or whatever the sport is, right? So those are the kind of kids that I look for, the coachable kids. Yes, of course you have to have talent, okay? But I want a coachable kid. And you can see that at those camps, man. Absolutely.
Here's a question. I want to dive into this one, Vince.
Okay, cool.
Coleman Smith asks, chances Craig commits after his official visit. I really do not want him, and we keep recruiting the other linemen. So I'm going to say this. Number one, I think there's a good chance that he's going to end up in the class. Okay?
I agree.
Just leave it at that. Having said that, we talked about Ashton Craig a week ago when it looked like Notre Dame was still going to get Billy Schrouth, and I felt Notre Dame was the co-leader for Carson Hinsman. And I said then, I want this kid in the class. I think we have to be able to separate the overall understandable frustration with Jeff Quinn's recruiting with the 3-star ranking that is being placed upon Ashton Craig.
Right.
Because if you take all the other context away, this is the kind of kid I'll take one of every year. He's a Joe Alt kind of guy. Maybe he never pans out. He's got a lower floor. But he could also pan out and be a 3-year starter and be a really good football player for you. There's not a huge difference to me from where he is as a junior and where Jarrett Patterson was as a junior. I don't think that there is. This is a good football player. And if he was at camps and doing the rivals thing and the Under Armour thing and all that, he'd be ranked higher. This kid can play. So there's no one in my opinion. This is what I'm told. Nobody bangs the Jeff Quinn criticism drum louder than me. Okay. And I'll continue to do that. I'll praise him when he deserves to be praised. We praised him for what he did in 2020 to the point where I'm telling people, let's see how the season goes and give him the benefit of the doubt because of the job that he did last year. Okay. So, but I'll criticize him if he needs to be criticized. I will never criticize Notre Dame for bringing in a kid a year like Ashton Craig ever. Number one, he's an in-state kid. There's going to be I like landing in-state kids. I just do.
Absolutely.
I think that there's a better chance that they stay, all that kind of stuff. Number two, I like these projectable kind of kids where you can just put them in the oven for a couple of years and let them cook. And you don't have to worry about them transferring after their freshman year because they're not starting and all this kind of stuff. Ashton Craig's not coming here saying, I started as a freshman or I'm leaving. Right? You can go put him in the oven and let him cook for a couple of years and then see how he does. He's going to be Matt Bayless's best friend kind of thing. But I love kids like this. And even if Notre Dame if you were to tell me Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees and Jeff Quinn are going to rebound and they're going to go get Billy Schrouth and they're going to go get, Joe Bruner or Jake Taylor. Okay, well, you don't take Ashton Craig now. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Make him your number 5. And yes, you do go get him. So I think we have to try to separate those two things and not take out on Ashton Craig our frustration with what's going on with Jeff Quinn. Because if you just independently look at this kid's film, I like the kid's film. I really do. He may never pan out at Notre Dame, but we've seen top 100 players never pan out at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like this kid is a kid that is a good take, regardless of what's happening everywhere else. Now, if you had, Billy Schrouth and Jake Taylor and, let's just say Zach Rice, and that was your 5, would you take him as your 6? No.
Right.
I mean, nobody's doing that. Nobody's signing that kind of O-line class, in my opinion. So I wanted to deal with that and just say, hey, look, this kid can play. Okay, this kid can play. All right, Tommy Leonard. Now we're back on track, Vince. If you want to read.
We actually have another.
We do.
Chat.
All right, let's do it.
So,
sorry, Tommy, you're getting booted.
So, Cupcake Banana.
Okay, first of all, great name.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too.
Great name.
He goes, I just wanted to show some support. Well, it could be a she. I apologize. They just wanted to show some support. I'm an international student at Notre Dame. Didn't really know much about football when I got here. Y'all have taught me a lot about this sport. IB rocks.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
I do have a couple questions for you. Where are you from?
Yep.
And what are you studying?
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear about that. And I'm so glad you found our channel. And the last part is really what is the most fun about doing this is when people say like, hey, I've learned so much about the game because I love this game. I was a much better baseball player than I was a football player, But I stopped playing baseball my freshman, sophomore year of high school because I just love football so much. You know, and I got back to playing, but like I love this game. It's an American game, right? It's still one of the few sports that's a traditionally American game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong. I hope it becomes international. I wish everybody played football, but it's just still so unique to America, is what I mean by that.
Absolutely.
And I love the game, and I think that it is a physical game. It's a barbaric game in some ways, which is okay, fine. But people, if you don't really know it, you don't appreciate the intellectual aspects of the game that you have to possess to be a great player. We see all these great athletes going to college and going to the NFL and stink because they don't have the mind for the game.
Yeah.
And I've never met a great player that didn't have a great mind for the game. And it's the same way with basketball, and all the greats they also had the IQ to be a great player, like the sport IQ. And I think football is a beautiful thing. I mean, a passing play doesn't work if everyone's not like on this harmonious timing and depth and all these wonderful things. It's I mean, it's going to sound kind of sensitive, but that's why I've compared it to a ballet. It's just an art. It's a graceful, artful thing. There's just in this ballet, you can tackle each other and throw each other to the ground, which makes
I mean, I would go watch that.
It's a little different spin on it, but I'm glad that you enjoy it, and I'm glad you got a chance to find our channel.
We got another one, Brian. They're rolling in, and I could not be more appreciative. Sean McArdle says, been watching on YouTube for about a month. Love it. Makes me feel like I'm at a bar with a bunch of cool Notre Dame football fans. Just much better informed. Least I could do is buy the next round.
I appreciate that very much, Sean.
Best comment at the end.
That is great. That is awesome.
This
one's on Sean. This one's definitely on Sean.
It's great. That is
love
fantastic.
I appreciate that. And if you don't mind, Cupcake Banana, if Cupcake Banana does kind of follow up,
I'll keep an eye
answers.
out.
I'd love to see.
Here we go. It's she. Thank you for that, by the way. That's why I corrected myself. So that's awesome. From India, don't have a lot of football back home. No, you don't. But we're happy to have you around. That's awesome.
I recently met a gentleman from India who actually my wife just hired. He does like some. He does some really. I don't even know what he does. He does like really technical graphic stuff. Really nice guy. Him and his wife just had a baby. Very nice. Very nice. So welcome, and I'm glad that you're enjoying the show.
That is awesome.
I'm curious too if you've been to a game yet. That's the other question I have.
That's
going to be a game yet.
That is going to be something
students
else,
were able to go to games last year, but I don't know. I don't know if she's a freshman or or if she was able to go to a game or not last year.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. So.
Tommy Leonard says, when it comes to start evaluating the next class, do you primarily look at players Notre Dame is recruiting hard first? How do you guys find like Bradshaw when Notre Dame isn't too high on them at the start? Well, partly because Notre Dame did look at him early and they offered him. And so, when like with anything, he kind of gets on Notre Dame's radar and I watch the film and I make my evaluation of him. There are times when I'll see a kid that I'll go to a camp and see a kid. Like I went to the Columbus camp. There's a couple kids that I saw. Had a chance to see the Ryan Baer kid up front before Notre Dame was offering him. Had a chance to see Sonny Styles and some other guys at the camp. But usually it's just if I find out that there's some interest that Notre Dame has, talking to sources and things like that. And it used to be, it's not like this with the current staff. I don't have a relationship with anybody like that. But I've had coaches in the past that if I was going to go cover an event, they'd say, hey, look, here's 8 guys that we're looking at who love some feedback on them. And be curious kind of what you think, what you see. Here's my concern. You watch them and you tell me what you think about it. So that's usually how it goes. Is just kid gets on Notre Dame's radar. I watch the film. So yes, rush the field.
Cupcake Banana rush the field.
Nice.
That is fantastic.
Love it.
Welcome to American football.
That's quite an orientation to Notre Dame football. That whole event was pretty awesome.
That's great.
Joe Gallego says, what players are you guys excited to watch this year? One from each unit. I'll go first, Vince, while you think about this one. Okay. On offense, I am very excited to watch Lawrence Keys this year. Very excited. And I mean, I could go with the obvious. Michael Mayer's a sophomore, and Chris Tyree, and now that Kyron Williams has a year under his belt. But I really think Lawrence Keys could be really good. I think he could provide to Notre Dame what Devontae Smith provided Alabama, not from a production dominant standpoint, right? I'm not saying he's going to have 98 catches and win the Heisman. I'm just referring to sort of the style of play, that really precision route runner, getting himself open as a route runner, that kind of thing. I think he can bring that style of play. So again, if anyone's watching this, hear what I'm saying. Style of play, not that he's going to bring the same level of production that Devontae Smith brought. Although that'd be pretty awesome. But that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. Defensively, Vince, I'm going to not steal the guy you were going to say, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And I'm going to say I can't give you one on defense. I'm torn. It's a tie between Jason Adamiola and Jack Kaiser.
Okay.
Those are the two guys I'm most looking forward to seeing. So I'm sorry, Joel. I had to cheat, but I just couldn't. I kept wanting to say Jack, and then I had to say Jason, and I just forget it. It's my show. I'm going to give you two of them. So it's going to be Jason Adamiola and Jack Kaiser.
Well, for me, you could go in about 4 or 5 different places offensively.
You can't pick more than one. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm going to go Blake Fisher on offense.
Okay.
I'm excited to see what a freshman can do at left tackle. And from everything I've heard,
time.
Exactly.
Haven't seen it in a very long time.
So I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table. Of course, I could go Chris Tyree and some other guys, but I'll stick with Blake Fisher. Defensively, of course, I'm going to go Cam Hart.
I knew it. That's why I was going to say it. But I was like, no, I can't.
I'm ride or die with Cam Hart. Have been since the beginning.
Cam's Vince's ride or die. There's no doubt.
but Jack Kaiser's high on my list as well. I love that kid.
Hey, Vince,
and
look, man,
I'm excited to see.
We all need our ride or die. We all have to have a ride or die in our lives.
That's right.
Okay, and Cam Hart is yours. It is all.
That's
good.
right. It is good.
It is all good. I won't tell Kristen that's your ride or die, but it's all good. It's all good. Jeff Fluke says, I respect it, but do you think not accepting some commitments while on a visit will backfire on theirs? I didn't say that they don't accept commitments during visits. There are some kids that if they wanted to visit during the time, they would have taken it. What I'm saying is they don't push it. And what they don't accept commitments from is kids who say, I want to commit, but I want to take more visits. They will say, hey, if you want to take more visits first.
Right.
But if a kid wanted to visit and commit, they would take it. They have taken it. There are kids that are committed to Notre Dame right now that committed on their visit. I'm not going to tell you who, but just there are.
Right.
There have been. Right. And so, yes, it's just more about what I'm saying, Jeff, just so we're on the same page, because it's a good question. What I'm saying is they don't push for kids to commit. If a kid is uncertain, they're not going to put the screws on them to try to get them to make a decision. They'll rarely do that. The only time they'll do that is if they have another kid that wants to commit and they want to really see where you stand. And it's a deal where, hey, we like you first, but the difference isn't so great that we wouldn't go take this kid if you're like, I want to take 4 more visits, that kind of thing.
Right.
And if a kid still wants to take another visit, they won't accept his commitment. That's the thing that they do. But if a kid wants to commit and he's an automatic take and he's ready to shut things down, they'll take his commitment, no question about it. And they have done that very recently.
Got another super chat, Brian. John Klimek jumping in. Thanks, John. He says, I agree Meyer will be the alpha. I think he starts the season slow as teams will know where he is every snap. Curious how Tommy uses that to his advantage.
Yeah,
no
we talked about that in that tight end check. That's going to be a very interesting part to the start of the season.
No doubt.
How quickly can Notre Dame figure out what each opponent is doing to defend Mayer? And then 2 things. 1, how can they use that to their advantage, like John asks? And then 2, how do they then use Mayer to then get him free?
Exactly.
Because you can't just give up on making him, hey, they're taking out the game. We won't get him the ball. Right? You need to be able to do both. The best coaches can do both. And knowing Tommy Rees, what little I know about him, meaning studying his film and things like that, not personally, I don't know him personally, I think he's going to make sure that they're working to get Michael Mayer the ball every week. And so that part I'm not worried about. The thing that I am curious to see is can they do the other part, which is how do they purposely use him to manipulate the defense? That's something I'm very curious to see.
Yep. Back to you, sir.
All right, Joseph Vaughn, I asked this yesterday and don't know if you saw it or not, but does Notre Dame having and recruiting bigger corners, which counter bigger receivers, help prepare the receivers for that matchup? I mean, to a degree. I mean, anytime you can go get something and you can see it, get used to it, I think that helps you. Yes, no question. And I mean, if you look at like the 2018 game, right, when against Clemson, where Clemson had bigger receivers. I mean, Vince, you and I have talked about this. That spring before that year, Miles Boykin like treated Julian Love like he was his little brother. Yes. I mean, he just destroyed him.
It's one way to
in
put
spring. And big reason for that is because, Ian and Brandon were both just throwing it up and letting Miles use his size.
Right.
Well, it's harder to do that against AJ Terrell. It's harder to do that against, Trayvon Mullen. So, I do. Yeah, Joseph, I think it's a great observation that is something that could help them prepare and handle those games. But it still makes it challenging to do that against the best teams. It's maybe you can make some more plays, but you're not going to go from not throwing the ball at all to throwing for 320 yards and beating those teams.
Right.
You have to still have a diverse skill set, in my opinion. But to your point, I think, like, for example, when the O-line, D-line has their battles, and you're going against Julian Aguara, and you're going against Dalen Hayes, and you're going to Kareem Nadio-Gandiji. I know for a fact from talking to different linemen and stuff over the years, those things help prepare them for. It's like we never played anybody on Saturday that was better than the dudes that we went against in one-on-ones and during the week. Now they don't play, but here's the thing though. They don't play against the ones and ones. Don't do a whole lot against each other once the season starts. The O-line, D-line will do some stuff, but pass rush stuff. But you're not doing 11 on 11 against your best defense. So that it can be a little bit limiting once you get to the season. And then you say, well, the younger players are down on scout team, but they're not quite to the level of your starters. But yeah, I think that's a really good observation, Joseph. I think overall, it's a really good observation. You back on track, Vince?
No, okay. I'm way off at this point. Okay,
we're at 12:50. Jojo Pineda. Hi guys. Looks like the wide receiver board might be Anderson, A.O. Manor, Merriweather, and Williams are the guys. Then B guys are Bradshaw, maybe Griffin and Green Jr. Don't know why they're focusing on the bigs. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about this. Andre Green Jr. is not a plan B. Andre Green Jr. would be a plan A if he had more interest in Notre Dame. He just doesn't have a lot of interest in Notre Dame. I mean, he's visited plenty of schools this summer, just not Notre Dame. He said he's going to visit them in the fall. Well, there's just not a lot of interest there. So he's not a plan B guy per se. The other guys, yes, they're plan B guys. And so I don't know if that's the 4 they're going to get, because there's no Amorian Walker on there, and I don't know if they're going to take 5 receivers. So I wouldn't say that would be what it would be. But yes, I think Anderson and Merriweather, I feel really good about where Notre Dame is right now. Williams, we have to see how the visit goes this weekend. But I think if things go the way that I hope and think, you could say they're going to be in a good position for him as well. Tyler Almeni, which running back, tight end, and wide receiver will have the most catches at Florida State in week 1? I think the running back one's kind of easy and cheating. I mean,
right.
It's easy. Kyron Williams.
It's going to be Kyron Williams for sure.
Tight end and receiver could be a little bit, could be a little bit of a.
Well,
it'd be easy to say Michael Mayer, but if Notre Dame's playing 12 personnel and Florida State does what we were just talking about,
right?
I could see George Takis come, because, and the reason I say that is, Vince, whoever the number 2 tight end is, let's just say it's going to be George Takis, because I'm really excited to see what George can do. Right. If you're Tommy Rees, right, and that, look, they're gonna game plan for Michael Mayer, it may be smart for you in game 1 to let every team on your schedule coming up know, if you want to try to stop him, 85 we have no problem going.
Right. Sure.
You know what I mean? Because you and I have said in the past, George Takis could start on over half the teams that Notre Dame's going to play this year.
Absolutely.
No question. And so he comes out and catches 5 balls in the opener. You're thinking, well, there goes our strategy about shutting down Michael Mayer. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That would be if they did that. First of all, if Florida State's not game planning to take away Michael Mayer, then Michael Mayer needs to catch 8 balls, right?
Absolutely.
If we're working with the assumption that Florida State's coaches aren't stupid and they're going to try to game plan for Michael Mayer, which I think is a fair assumption.
When I was taking a drink.
Sorry. I'm going to get you one of these days to just launch it on the computer screen. That's ultimately my goal. I almost got you a couple times before the show started. But
you did.
I'm going to do it live one of these days. But then it would be a smart counter by Tommy Rees and John McNulty and Lance Taylor and the staff that are involved in this to say, okay, cool. We know they're going to do this. We have a plan in our back pocket that once they see this, we're going 12 personnel, and this is what we're doing.
Right.
We're going to run Michael Mayer on. We're going to go 12. We're going to run Michael Mayer on a seam, on a vertical route. We're going to run our receiver to that side on a vertical route. We're going to free release Kyron Williams into the backfield, and we're going to bring George Takis on a drag route right behind it. We're going to clear all that out, and we're going to hit George 10 yards down the field, and he's going to rumble for 20.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We're going to hit some bootlegs. We're going to hit them with some backside seams and things like that. So you go to a trips formation with Mayer and Takis. You run Mayer right up that seam. That free safety is going to run right with Michael Mayer. I'm banging that backside seam route to George Takis, right? And I'm doing that early and basically say to everybody we play, you want to try to take Michael Mayer out of the game? Fine. We're good with that because we have the best tight end room in the country. That's something they need to that I think they need to do early. So I could see a scenario then, Vince, where in the first game of the year, it's not Michael Mayer that has the most catches at tight end. Receiver, I'm going to let you answer because that's the harder one.
Well, it is a hard one because I'm hoping that they're going to spread it out and you're going to have a bunch of guys with like 5 catches, 4 catches. You know what I mean? Like that would be ideal. Now, obviously, somebody's going to have the most. I'll stick with my guy. I'll stick with Avery Davis. I think he's the most veteran guy returning. He's got, the most, I don't know if to say moxie. I think that he could be, I don't even want to say a security blanket because Jack Cohn's never played for Notre Dame, so he doesn't have a security blanket, right? So he might
we
be
could see that security blanket, show up in the first game. But yes,
you could. Yeah,
hopefully they're triple teaming the security blanket. It's number 87.
Well, fair enough. So, but I'm still going to stick with Avery Davis. I think that he has a good opportunity to make some plays in that game.
I'm going Avery and Lawrence Keys with a tie. I think they're both going to catch 5 passes.
Fair enough.
That's what I'm going with. Am I allowed to cheat there, Tyler? I'm cheating a lot today, guys. I'm
you
sorry.
Are. But again,
I apologize.
Your name's on the show, so it is what it is.
Yeah. Although, if you think about it, my wife had more to do with all of this than I did.
That's also fair. She can cheat all she wants.
Whoa.
Oh.
All right, Nolan Esparza. The one thing in the spring game that has me most excited for next year on offense would be the amount of passes over the middle of the field. That has just not been a part of our offense for a while. I agree completely. And not just that you had a quarterback willing to do it, but your quarterback's not going to do it if it's not being called.
Correct.
Now, it's been called in the past. We've talked about this. And last year, Tommy Rees was smart enough to say, I'm not going to keep trying to pound a square peg into a round hole, so I'm just not going to call a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, right.
But
throw it.
Right, but I liked seeing that too. Again, from an execution standpoint, but also from a play calling standpoint. There was a lot of stuff, and not all of it. Like there was one play where where Tyler Buckner read left and then came back to Lawrence Keys on a deep in cut. Well, we just never saw Ian Book do that. I mean, with all due respect. So number one, they called that. I mean, and then to see that freshman come back to that, and we saw Jack Cohn do the same thing. So I agree with you, Nolan. I'm very excited to see that. AJ, okay, here's a good one. AJ says, I'm attending the Virginia Tech game this year. Very excited to see Lane Stadium and to experience the best entrance to college football. Number one, I'm curious, AJ, for you to come back after that game and see if you still believe that. Because when I went to the game in 2018, I left the game thinking, this is not the best interest in college football. It was very anticlimactic, in my opinion. Second part of his question. I typically avoid road games after some unpleasant times at Spartan Stadium and the Big House. I am from Michigan. I'm so sorry. I will be far more patient with you from now on, knowing you have to suffer through that. Do you guys know anything about Virginia Tech fans and how they treat opposing fans? My dad was at that game in 2018, and he said it was mostly just good-hearted trash talking. And my dad's been to a lot of road games, especially like in the Mid-Atlantic region, because they're from Norfolk, Virginia, so they get to a lot of those games. He said it was mostly good-natured ribbing and not – because you got to understand is Virginia, they love the Hokies and the Cavaliers, but it's still an NFL state. It's still a Washington football team state. So it's not as much of as a blue blood diehard college football state as like Ohio or Michigan or Alabama or even for Florida. But they love their Hokies out there. That's what my dad said. Now, I'd be curious if anybody else attended that game in 2018, but that's what my dad said. And he was rocking Notre Dame gear and all that kind of stuff. And he just said, early in the game, there were some Hokie fans talking a little trash, and it was, again, all good fun. He said, but they were dead quiet in the second half.
Pretty quickly.
And the only ones that talked to him in the second half were just fans who were like, hey, where are you guys from? Did you guys come down here from Indiana? I mean, it was good. It was a good experience. And honestly, so far, all the experiences I've seen in the South have been good. I thought Wake Forest fans were very cool. I thought Clemson fans were great in 2015. Again, a lot of trash talking, but it was like trash talking like, hey, come over to our tailgate, have some beers, and let's talk trash in pregame. It's like how college football is supposed to be, not like your sister's this and your mother's this, and you end up fighting like you get at Michigan. You know what I mean? With those people. So, Georgia fans were awesome when I was there 2 years ago. They were great. Again, was there a lot of trash talking? Yeah. But it was fun trash talking. It was like, with a smile on your face and a laugh. It wasn't like, I dare you to step to me because I want to brawl because I have nothing else better to do with my life except being an obnoxious Michigan fan. So did I say that out loud? Sorry.
It happens.
Yeah. Michael Collins. Michael, I'm going to put your question up, but honestly, there's like no way you can top the last time you left the question. I mean, the last comment you made was about and somebody stole his comment and did you see that on Father's Day? Somebody put a picture of Brian. They took a body of a dad holding a kid on his shoulders, and they put Brian Kelly's face on the dad and Clay Helton's face on the kid.
Wow.
They totally stole Michael's idea.
Wow.
They totally stole Michael's idea because it's someone who follows me. So they saw that I tweeted out that Michael said, happy Father's Day to Notre Dame for being USC's daddy. It was beautiful. But we will still read your comment, even though I feel like you can never live up to that standard. If you do, that's going to be a phenomenal thing. He says, can you comment on how Bradshaw reacted to Notre Dame canceling his visit? I cannot. Now, anything to read into his Twitter account, still having a linked article, his personal post about his official visit in the feed. First of all, he doesn't do much on social media. So I doubt he's even been on Twitter in the last couple of days. He just is not a kid that's on social media much. My understanding is he was on vacation when he made that announcement. And so some of this might be a scheduling deal of getting back on vacation and time to still make the visit. So, there may be some of that stuff as well. My understanding is that Notre Dame was honest with him and it like they still want him on to visit. Right. So it's not like they just completely dropped him. They just want him to visit later, which was the original plan. They had originally wanted him to visit in the fall. So I don't, as far as I know, there's no negative reaction there. We haven't been. We tried to reach out yesterday and his coach said he hadn't heard anything from him. So I don't even know if he's back from vacation yet, to be honest with you. They may have just stayed or just got back last night. So we'll see what happens. Michael Keeley, longtime listener to the podcast. Thank you, Michael. I believe we've spoken before, but this is my first live show. Appreciate the information and insight, fellas. Who is the best college football player you have ever seen live? Notre Dame player, then all of college football. Interesting one. My best thing live is Quentin Nelson and Manti Te'o on each side of the ball.
Wow. Going with Notre Dame guys, huh?
Yeah. As far as best player, the most dynamic player I've ever seen was Jalen Smith. I feel like Jalen Smith was not as good of a college player as he should have been, but it wasn't his fault. It was Brian Van Gorder's fault.
If we're going most dynamic, it's Reggie Bush for me from a college standpoint. Seeing him in person, that dude can play ball. He was an electric college player, and it pains me. It hurts it to come out of my mouth that it was a USC player. But that dude was still he was electric. Let's see, who else could it be?
I'm trying. That's a good one for me. I mean, Andrew Luck is probably the best one I've ever seen in person. That's probably who I would say.
Yeah,
be the one for me.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
I got to see him play twice, actually, 2010 and 2011.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you who the runner-up is just as far as just being a college football player. And, again, I saw Leonard Fournette in 2014, but I got to say, the second best opposing college football player I ever saw was Denard Robinson.
He was electric
so
for
good.
all the wrong reasons for me.
He was so good.
It was so annoying.
And again, he asked about other if he would have played anywhere but Michigan, I would have loved that kid.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to love a college football player. But Denard Robinson was
he was special. I agree.
And Will Fuller was a pretty good player too. But Quentin Nelson was just the best offensive lineman I've ever seen.
And it was so much fun to watch.
Yeah. Now again, keep in mind, I attended 2 Notre Dame games before I started covering the team in 2010, and they were both in 2007. So I didn't see a lot of those guys live. The best player I've ever seen live. I watched a couple high school, So my dad's friends with one of Dre Bly's relatives, and so they got us tickets to one of the Gator Bowls when he was playing West Virginia. So I got a chance to see him play in college too. But that was still gave me bad memories from when he picked me off when I was a freshman. But he was pretty good too. But yeah, I'd say Andrew Luck's the best college player I've seen. I got a chance to see him play in 2010 at Notre Dame and then 2011 out in Sanford. Okie dokie. Larry Friedel says, is the door closed on all 3 of the offensive line recruits from Wisconsin? No, it is not. It's not closed on any of them as far as I know. But it's just not trending in the right direction with any of them. Vince, we're still not even to 1 o'clock yet.
Yeah,
I love you all. I mean, this is awesome. We're an hour into the show, and we've yet to get to the questions that started when the show started.
Right.
That's so awesome. And we had people – this comment was made before the show started. Let it play out, boys. That was even before the show started. That's awesome. Jay says, do you guys think Xavier is in the decision because of how quiet he's been after the Indy visit? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is he in decision-making mode? I think he's in, okay, let me start thinking through all this. I don't know if he's necessarily in decision-making mode, like he may commit tomorrow. I think he's in, let me really sit down and think about all this.
Yeah.
He may even have another visit scheduled. I'm not sure. I'm have to look that up, but I think he's probably one of those kids that's going to sit down and I think this will kind of be the case with Tobias Merriweather. I think it's going to be the case with CJ Williams. I think it's going to be the case with a lot of these kids. He does not, as far as I know, he does not have any other visits scheduled. So at least according to 247 Sports, he does not have any other visits scheduled. So, but I think a lot of these kids are going to really get into decision-making mode after the June visits, and they're going to sit down and kind of think through it all before their football season start, is what I think we're going to see with a lot of kids. And is that a good thing or a bad thing for Notre Dame? I think it's a good thing. I think the longer this carries out, the better it is for Notre Dame, because I think Ohio State's going to pick up more commitments in the secondary, and I think that's going to help Notre Dame. And I think that it gives Notre Dame continued time to still be on him, talk to him, develop that relationship, for him to connect with Notre Dame recruits. So this is one of those ones that I think the longer it plays out, I actually think the better it is for Notre Dame. Absolutely. D-Rock, my man, back in the house this Friday with Brian and Vince. Happy Friday, everyone, and go Irish.
Nice.
Jojo Pineda says, we usually battle Michigan for recruits. Now it seems like it's Ohio State and to a lesser extent Oregon. Goes to show how far Michigan has dropped the last few years because of Harbaugh. That's very true. I also think it also shows even more is that Notre Dame is going after, especially in this cycle, a higher caliber of prospect. Because here's the reason they went after Michigan so much in past years. Because Michigan was afraid to go against Ohio State, and Notre Dame was afraid to go against Ohio State. And now Notre Dame is not afraid to go against Ohio State. And you're going to lose most of them. But
sure,
if you get 1 or 2, you're getting 1 or 2 dudes
that you wouldn't have had before, though.
That's
too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's a positive. I think that's a good sign. I think going against Clemson more, and that's what we love so much about, Ryan Barnes last year is, people can say all they want about his 3-star ranking, but Clemson wanted him and Notre Dame got him. That's a win for me.
That's a win, man.
Give a rip about what Rivals or 247 think about him, with all due respect to them, at least all due respect to 247, but I mean that, that's what I care more about. And at the end of the day, I still care more about film than anything else.
Right.
But as we explained last week, if Clemson wants a kid at certain positions, that's going to mean something to me. If you're beating Ohio State for a kid that Ohio State wants, that means something to me, especially on defense, especially at receiver and on defense. If you can do those two, you're doing something. You beat Ohio State for an offensive lineman, you're like, well, yeah, you're supposed to do that. You're Notre Dame. Harry Heastan did that. Ed Warner did that, right? So, but receivers, running backs, if that ever happens, hasn't yet. They are 0 against Tony Alford so far. But if someday comes and you beat Ohio State for a running back, that would mean something to me.
It means a lot to me.
So that's what we do. And Liam Gaming said this at 102, but we're just now getting to it at 224. But make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button and the notification bell. We're going to try to fly through these because Vince has to go at 3 o'clock, so I want to try to get him.
I get grades in.
And this is what D-Rock said at 102. This is at 102. The show started at 105.
I was going to say we didn't start on time,
right?
So
you just had to rub that in my face. D-Rock says at 102, 3 minutes before the show even started, all my questions have been taken before 1 o'clock.
That's great.
I love you guys so much. This is so much fun. Tony Stengel, it says it really seems like there are 2 position coaches that are not up to par when it comes to developing talent and recruiting. You can guess who. Is Notre Dame's 2 position coach upgrades? Is Notre Dame 2 position coach upgrades away from being elite? Yes, on one of them. I still would like to see Coach Alexander unleashed, meaning he gets his head out of his you-know-what when it comes to not being afraid to get jumped on in practice or jumped on by the coach in a film session. Just stop being afraid of that. That's part of the deal with Brian Kelly, okay? Go coach the flipping kids up. Go do what I know you're capable of doing. Coach these kids up. Change your strategy. Because I actually do think Dell Alexander's a good coach. I really do. I think he's not coaching to his full potential. Just like sometimes players don't play to their full potential.
Sure.
Sometimes coaches don't coach to their full potential. I think the other one is, I think that's as good as it's going to get. And that's all offensive line. I hope I want Jeff Quinn to prove me wrong. I do. But right now, I do think he is – my fear is that he's going to be a roadblock to Notre Dame getting to that next level. Because the Harry Hiestand influence is now completely gone.
Yep, and we've talked about that, yeah.
Got Super Chat minutes?
Yeah, John A1 hitting us with the Super Chat. Thanks for another mailbag. Can the 2021 offensive line be on par with the 18 or 19 offensive lines? Should they be better than either group?
It has to be better than 2019. Has to be better, or they're going to be in trouble. That 2019 offensive line was a mess. And honestly didn't get solidified till late in the year when they started playing bad teams. I mean, that was just not a good situation. That was bad coaching. I mean, Vince, you and I the conversations we had that year at games about the offensive line were just, it was bad. Yeah. 2018 was a decent offensive line. It wasn't great. It was getting really good. It was starting to really hit its stride against Stanford. You had a couple games where you went for over 200 yards against Wake Forest. You went for over 200 yards against rushing against Vanderbilt, and then Alex Bars went down. And they were never the same.
Nope.
So I kind of give Coach Quinn a little bit of a pass on 2018 because of losing Alex Bars. But, Sam Musford took a big step back that year. That was problematic to me. When you see starters taking steps back, Tommy Kramer took a step back that year. That's what concerned me more than anything. Liam Eichenberg, got better as the year went on, but when Alex Bars went down, that line was never – we don't know how good that line would have been. They were just starting to hit their stride. Now, they did it against teams that weren't great on defense.
Sure.
But they were pounding Stanford before he got hurt. I mean, Dexter Williams, first time he touched the ball that season, in that game, he goes for like 45-yard touchdown. Doesn't get touched. They were really starting to hit their stride. When Alex went down, it just they weren't the same. Because with all due respect to whoever else they put there, Aaron Banks, Trevor Rulin, they tried Trevor Rulin first, then eventually Aaron Banks took over. None of those guys were Alex Bars. I think Alex Bars would have been a second or third round draft pick had he not got hurt. I really do. Because his knee got torn up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Which is why he got undrafted. But now he's recovered, and guess what? He's starting in the National Football League. All righty. Where are we at here?
Back to the top, brother.
Okay.
And the top for me isn't until 137.
Okay.
So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm a ways away.
All right, here we go. Michael Collins says, can you please elaborate on the offer process at Notre Dame? At what points are Bill Reese and Matt Balis involved? Who are the key support staff, i.e. Coach Cooks and Lazinski behind the scenes? So number one, you named two of them. Yeah. And I just had a conversation with somebody recently that was like, people do not understand how good Nick Lazinski is at this recruiting thing. He really is influential in recruiting, and especially with commits and players like that. I think he plays a big role in that. I think Kerry Cooks helps with that. I think Chad Bowden, obviously, in doing a lot of the scheduling and behind-the-scenes stuff. So I think Aaron Kearney and his staff do a great job. He's one of the – I don't know his official title. But they do a lot of the stuff as far as – that wasn't an insult. I still don't know what his official title is.
Because they have convoluted titles.
Yeah, but they do a great job of organizing the on-campus visits and talking to kids and making sure that they're reaching out to kids and being involved with kids and things like that. They just hired a young lady to run on-campus recruiting. I don't know. I kind of joke with a buddy of mine. She came from Wisconsin, and like a week after she gets here and she gets hired, like all the three Wisconsin linemen are not looking at Notre Dame anymore, according to sources. So I'm like, what's going on here? Like, did Paul Chris get a spy here? But I'm obviously just kidding. But I think Wisconsin was coming off a couple of their best classes they've had in a while with her there. So I think I'm curious to see how she's going to be able to impact it. But Bill Reese and his crew do a great job. I mean, they do a lot of the weeding out of prospects to then get to the coaches. And, as I said, I believe we talked about this yesterday, when Bill Reese pounds on the table for a kid, you listen. There's just a lot of trust there because, this is a guy that was the recruiting coordinator for Terry Donahue back when UCLA was like really, really good. He's a former NFL scout. He knows football. And he's really good at finding those under the radar. I mean, everyone can look at Blake Fisher and be like, yeah, that guy's really good, right? You don't need like a pay someone, hey, go find me the next Blake Fisher. Yeah, sure. When God puts that kid on this planet, I'll let you know that he's shown up. You know what I mean? But it's finding the Ryan Barneses and finding the those kind of guys, the Joe Alts, those kind of players, the Kyron Williamses, those kind of guys that maybe are the under radar guys that don't stand. That's your job, is to find those guys and get them to campus or get them in front of the assistant coaches, and then they'll ultimately make the decisions on who they want. Matt Bayless's role is very important, but it's more deeper into the process. Now my understanding is he will watch some film, but he's more about, I need to see these kids in person.
Right.
He needs to get these kids on campus, and he's just kind of like, okay, yeah, that could work. You know what I mean? Or no. Narrow shoulders, doesn't have real big feet. We can get him up to 300 pounds, but he's going to lose his quickness when he gets up there. Those kind of things. Matt Bayless is very involved in that, in saying, yeah, this kid's got the frame to do this. We can work with this. Yeah, I can get that kid faster. That kid's eating, Twinkies and fried foods every day. He comes here, we get him on our strength program, our nutrition program. That kid's going to drop a 10th off his 40-yard dash, and he's going to get 15 pounds bigger. And you know what I mean? That's where he plays a big role. And and this is a great question, Michael, because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that it's not just the 10 assistants and Brian Kelly. If you're going to be a great recruiting operation, you need the Nick Lazinskis, you need the Aaron Kearneys, you need the Chad Bowdens and the Bill Reeses.
We're banging the table to say they need to upgrade that whole department. Not upgrade, but just get more bodies in there, and because those are the guys that are doing the grassroots stuff.
And, the coaches, you got to be careful with that, because you can have too many cooks in the kitchen.
True. No. You're right. You're right. But the coaches aren't necessarily sitting there sifting through film looking for guys.
They used to.
And
that's why these new these recruiting staffs are so important, because it's not the coaches. It's hey, I need to trust you.
Right.
And that's why a guy like Bill Reese is so important. I need to have full confidence, because I'll be honest with you. If I was at Notre Dame and it was someone that wasn't like a Bill Reese, like some guys that they've had in that kind of role in the past, he said, yeah, we're not going to recruit this because, okay, cool. I trust you. Give me the film anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, I would have been like that, because I saw a lot of like, they don't think that kid can play, or they think that kid can play. Like, that person needs to be moved away. I haven't had that same issue since Bill Reese has gotten here. And that's why I say, like, this Ashton Craig kid, I don't like Ashton Craig because I think Bill Reese found him. I have no idea. But what I'm saying is that's the kind of kid that you have to look at and say, that's the kind of project that maybe he's not a great high school recruit, but he could be a really good college player.
Right.
And those are the kind of guys that I think Bill Reese has done a great job finding in recent years. So that's a great question. Tom Freeman says, does the staff's hesitancy to recruit Bradshaw indicate that they may be more comfortable using some of their backs in a hybrid role? I don't think so. No. Here's what Tom, this is a great question, because I think Matthew Lass was bringing this up when we were talking about this the other day. I honestly think that this is more of just an evaluation of Xavier Bradshaw. I'm concerned about the future of the receiving depth chart. I've voiced those concerns. I don't think that they put enough emphasis on athletic receivers. I think loading up with 4 big guys that just kind of play this way in one class is a mistake. Having said that, I'm hopeful, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, that that's not ultimately the only kind of receiver they want to recruit. Carnell Tate's sort of that kind of guy, but he brings some explosiveness. But they just had Jaylen Brown on campus from Gulliver Prep in Miami. He's a 6', 165 dynamic kid that would be the best non-big receiver they've landed since Will Fuller was playing for Notre Dame. And I mean, he's that kind of recruit. He was on campus recently. He comes from he goes to a private school in Miami that you don't go there if you're not a kid if you don't come from a family background. And I talked to a source about this yesterday. He comes from a really good family background where academics are very important. That's why he's at Gulliver Prep and not at some other schools that are more football oriented. He's a kid that understands what makes Notre Dame different. And so we're going to try to get more intel on him. But the intel I got last night from a good source of mine was like, keep an eye on Notre Dame and Jaylen Brown. Dell's on him hard. That was a great thing for me to hear. Coach Alexander's on him hard. Tommy Reese is on him. Great to hear. He loved his visit to Notre Dame. Great to hear. He's the kind of kid we're talking about. So I'm trying to be open-minded here. I'm lobbing my criticisms, and I've made it be known. This is my fear. But then I look at some of the kids, Nathaniel Joseph, who's like 5'10", 5'11" from Florida. Dynamic athlete. They're recruiting him. So there are some kids in the 2023 class that they're recruiting that way. They're not recruiting as many big guys because in 2023, there's more smaller dynamic receivers than there is in 2022. This could simply be a situation of there just aren't a lot of those guys in this class, and they don't think Xavier Bradshaw's as good as I think Xavier Bradshaw is. Right. If that's all this is, I can live with that. I can surely live with a difference of opinion about one kid. What I can't live with is if they think they're going to go back to playing power forward football. That's what I can't live with. But when you look at the 2023 recruiting operation so far, and some of the kids they're recruiting hard so far, there's some dynamic athletes in that group. So it could just be that. It could just be like, look, 2022, there's just more bigger kids. We get Tobias, we get CJ, you get Anderson, you get a Morian, and then next year we're recruiting athletes, and you space it out that way, I'm good. I'm really good. If you get like a Jaylen Brown next year's class and a Cardinal Tate, I'm good. Okay, I wish you would have also got Xavier, but that's more of a nitpick than a big chastisement of the entire operation. So I want to make sure that I'm being fair on this, because we do need to see things kind of continue and be open-minded enough to look at it and say, every year you can't recruit the same type of guy because, number one, your needs may be greater, but number two, not every class has the same number of this type of player every year. Exactly. Some years it's a deep quarterback year. Some years it's like you get the 5th quarterback in the country and he ain't that good. Right. Other years you get the 15th best quarterback in the country and you're like, that kid can ball.
You're ready to go. Yeah.
You know, the 15th best quarterback in 2022 can't touch the 15th ranked quarterback in the 2023 now, much less what they're going to be a year from now. It just happens. And so I want to make sure that I'm not taking back any of my criticisms of the receiving situation right now. I'm not. But I am saying, but just because I don't like this doesn't mean that I just am going to hold that opinion for the rest of my life, no matter what they do. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Did we had a super chat down there, Vince? I saw.
I did not.
I talked through it. Yeah,
I apologize.
It's okay.
Oh, yep, there it is. Michael Collins dropping in with a super chat. Thank you, sir. When Notre Dame's defensive line dominates Wisconsin's offensive line at Soldier Field this fall, I'll lead an Elston is Rudolph's daddy chant in my Gap Closer shirt. Rudolph is the Wisconsin O-line coach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
Great comment.
I love it. He did. He brought it. I mean, he did. I didn't think he could come close to matching that, but he did. He kind of came with a little something, Vince, and I'm here for all that. He's bringing the smoke today. And I'm here for that. I'm here for that, absolutely. So I absolutely love that comment.
We need to talk about that game, Brian, later on. Just that reminded me. We need to talk about that game later on. That just reminded me. So I just
he's talking about Joe Rudolph, by the way, who's the O-line coach and run game coordinator at Wisconsin, which is absolutely a phenomenal comment. But hilarious. No, I think that is. I mean, practically speaking, though, that's going to be a very important part of this matchup.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame's D-line can't whoop Wisconsin, then that is going to be a more competitive game than it should be.
Right.
So I mean, that's a huge matchup. But yes, Vince and I will hopefully both beat that game. We're going to obviously try to get 2 credentials to that game. But
yes,
when the game is getting close to being over, I will make sure that Vince is outside somewhere so he can hear and be listening for Elston's Rudolph's daddy. Okay. And I expect every other person in the Irish Breaking family to be listening for that.
That's right.
And to start it, because then if you start kind of getting it, hey, I hear Michael over here. Okay, Vince is yelling. No, you can't yell at Vince.
I can't yell.
You're professional. But if another, if other people are watching it and they hear it, and then all of a sudden, Elston's your daddy, and then I'm good with that. I can live with that. Yeah. So, and I'm sure Mike Elson would probably appreciate that as well.
D Beezy's hitting us with a super chat as well. He says, Coach, if you could put Ronald Curry on any Notre Dame team, which would it be? Also, I agree on the Tupac album. Close second, Me Against the World.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go reverse order here. Me Against the World is my favorite Tupac song. That was like my anthem in high school, right, in college, right? I just had that kind of mentality. Thank God the Lord has taken that away from me. And I really mean that, because it did. I mean, you kind of have that mentality, and you have a lot of anger when you think the whole world's against you, but I mean, that was literally like my anthem in high school and college. That's how I lived my life. I just thought that's how it was. So that was my favorite song, but I just like the other. I mean, Ambitions as a writer, like if you're down at you're at the beach or you're cruising along, I mean, you just come on, man. How do you not come on. So anyway, back to the first part of the question. If I could put Ronald Curry on any Notre Dame team, which one would it be? 2017. That would be the team I'd put it on. Behind that offensive line, with his ability to run, you had Chase Claypool and rotating receiver. You had EQ. You had Durham Smythe. Oh, boy. Because part of me says 1993, but, Ronald Curry would have been like, I don't know if he would have been used as the thrower that he would have needed to be used as with Coach Holtz. 05, I mean, Brady Quinn was the deal. 2012, 2012 is another one that I think about. Like if you'd have put Ronald Curry, what he should have been on that team, I mean, he's a bigger, better athlete, better throwing version of Everett Golson. I mean, way better version of Everett Golson. But the team that I felt really genuinely had the best chance to win a title, I've said this for a while, I really felt like that 2017 would have had a chance. So 15 or 17 would have been my pick. That's who I would have gone with, 15 or 17. And now I'm saying 17. I'm thinking, man, but 15 though. If you have Ronald Curry throwing to Will Fuller with CJ Prosise in the backfield, you know what? I'm gonna change my answer. I'm gonna go 15. I'm gonna go 15.
You just talked yourself out of an answer.
No, because here's why. Because I look at that 2017 team, and it wasn't just Brandon Wimbush is why they lost 41-8. Yeah, it wasn't his fault. I mean, you know what I mean? It wasn't all his fault.
True.
But 2015, you're talking about a team that lost by 2 to Clemson. Team that lost by, however many was like two to Stanford, battled Ohio State. You put Ronald Curry oh man. Yeah, 2015. That's my final answer. It's my final answer. Yep, it's a good question. How about you, Vince? I know.
I'm with you.
I'm just messing with you on the Tupac. I know you don't have a favorite Tupac album.
Yeah, I definitely do.
We listened to different music when we were kids.
Yeah, I've never really listened to a lot of music, to be perfectly honest with you. So I can't
so
even
happy all the time. I get it now.
I am a classic rock. I'm an older guy, older soul when it comes to music, I guess. So that's just me.
I do like all types of music, but it's funny when I was a kid. People say, how'd you get into like hip hop and rap? And I say, well, there's a lot of reasons for it, but who I hung out with and who my friends were, and I was an athlete, and all that kind of. But I mean, when I was a kid, elementary, I had, we had remember that was big radios, and they had like 2 cassettes that you could record, and you had like the 45 on top, and then you had the thing you could tune in the radio.
Wow. Okay, yeah,
I had one of those right for Christmas. Oof. And so I didn't buy. When you're in the in the 80s, you didn't buy like 45s of like modern music. So I used them. I had my parents' old 45s. And so like my mom was big into like the Temptations. My dad was into Temptations. My mom liked Al Green and Bill Withers and stuff like that. So like, I listened to a lot of that stuff. And so of course the natural progression is to sort of R&B and hip hop, and because they would sample a lot of that stuff in a lot of hip hop albums. Like that's why I love DJ Premier so much, because he samples so much great music in his songs. You know what I mean? And so, that's I think that was kind of that natural progression, Vince. But yeah, I kind of grew up on that older stuff, and then that led to, as I got into middle school and high school, led me more to becoming a guy that was into hip hop and R&B and kind of stuff. So anyway, but yeah, that Ronald Curry one always gets me going. Adam Grad says, thanks as always for the quality and quantity of content. I appreciate that very, very much. Trust me, this last week or two, there have been 3 or 4 days where I'm just like, I don't want to do a show today. I'm worn out, but then we get here and it's a ton of fun, and I know you guys are all here waiting on us. And so it makes it a lot of fun. So Tyler Bedwell says, I may have missed this previously, but has there been any info on how Benjamin Morrison's visit went? He is a guy I would love to see in the class. So it went really well. The visit went really well. Notre Dame felt really good about where things stood with him. Washington has changed that a little bit. And now there's a lot of smoke coming from the Washington side of things. And again, I haven't been able to get this confirmed, but there's a lot of smoke coming from the Washington side of things that Washington feels like they've overcome and surpassed Notre Dame, which the Jimmy Lake effect continues. They've beaten him for a couple kids, but Jimmy Lake and he's beaten good recruiters too. I mean, he beat Mike Elko for Kyler Gordon. I mean, They beat Notre Dame for Asa Turner. I mean, Notre Dame's had their wins too. They got Chance Tucker. They beat him for Chance Tucker last year. They beat him for Jordan Patelho, but for the most part, Jimmy Lake's been hard to beat for kids out west, and that they're still battling, but that's why you're seeing Notre Dame make a bigger push for Jaden Bellamy, in my opinion, is why you're seeing that. John the Kazmarek says, "Hey Brian, I'm just curious if you're familiar with wide receiver Cooper Barkate in his recruiting situation at all. Rivals Futurecast seems to think he is leaning to Notre Dame. Any intel or knowledge on that?" So the Futurecast, I believe, are old ones. I don't think those are new. They stopped recruiting him a while ago, in my opinion, from what I'm told. They were on him early. There were people that put crystal balls and Futurecast in on him early. I don't think those are new. And actually, I'd actually, Vince, are you able to kind of look that up? Are you able to go to his recruiting profile? Yep. Just type in Cooper Barkate Rivals.
Yep.
And see when the last one that was put for Notre Dame is on that one. But I'm going to bet you it's from several months ago. They like him, but they liked him as a DB more than a receiver, and I think he wants to play more receiver. I believe he's at Mater Dei now, correct? He was not at Mater Dei previously, but I believe he's at Mater Dei now. But I think there's just other guys on the board from what I know. And so he's not a guy that's necessarily a push right now. Does it show, Vince, like when the last Notre Dame Futurecast went in for him?
It just says 52% towards Notre Dame. It doesn't give a date.
Okay.
Underneath it, I'm clicking and looking.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah,
but I just kind of had a feeling that that was the case, and that's the fan Futurecast. So it doesn't look like there are any Futurecasts in from
correct.
From any publishers or anything like that. So that's just fans, and that's probably from a while ago. Yeah. So I don't believe he's on the radar anymore. Jack Sullivan, first day I've been able to make a live show in a while. Work called off for rain. Good to be here. Yeah, because Jack, I believe I think you still work at the golf course, right? So when it rains, you're like, yep, no work for me today.
Nice.
So yeah, glad to have you here, Jack. Glad to have you here, buddy. Appreciate you being with us. All righty. And I just got booted, Vince. So I've officially been kicked out. I got a lot in. I got more in than I thought I was going to get. But we're now here. We're going to have
that's where I'm at too.
About Allison. If anyone had a question before that we missed, and you see that we've clearly missed you, please put it back in. There's nothing we can do about it. Like I'm sitting there, I'm not even touching it, and it's boom, it just kicks me to the bottom.
To push you to the bottom, and then it only goes back an hour.
Yeah. So I do apologize, and we tried to work through as many questions as we could to get caught up, but we'll see how it goes. Allison asked, "Can you explain the role of graduate assistants in college football in general?" They've changed a lot. They've changed a lot in recent years.
And basically, depending on to be honest with you,
and there's roles for GAs for good coaches and bad coaches.
There you go. Okay, I was going to say, and it also depends on how much the coach trusts the GA, because they will be a legit coach, a position coach for
That's how Chris Watt was last year.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, Chris Watt basically was like the co-O-line coach last year.
Correct.
I know this for a fact. Not only did he coach a lot during practice, but he did a lot of the film sessions with certain players last year.
There you go.
And so, but O-line, GAs, they'll help. And Clark Lee took very great advantage of the GA situation, which is why Chris O'Leary has the job he has now.
Right, because he was a GA.
And he got an opportunity to coach. Mm-hmm. So he actually got an opportunity to go show himself.
On-the-job training, yeah.
Right.
Or, resume.
And that was partly because Clark Lee trusted him.
Right.
Mike Elko brought a kid with him that was, I believe, a GA that's now with him at Texas A&M as a full-time coach. We've seen that we talked about Ryan Mahaffey. Mike Denbrock used Ryan Mahaffey, who was a GA, and because he was the offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock he allowed Ryan Mahaffey to do some things with the receiver. So, and then that got him a job at Northern Iowa, and I think he's at like Western Kentucky or something now, right? So it's helped him become a full-time coach. But if you're smart, you hire a kid that's a young coach that needs an opportunity, and you allow him to maybe supplement it as a place where you would like more help. So you bring in a second O-line coach, or you bring in if your offensive coordinator is a quarterback's coach and he wants someone to kind of maybe can take the quarterbacks through drills, and then I'll handle everything else. You hire a guy that can maybe be a GA there. Receivers, if your offensive coordinator is a receivers coach, maybe you bring a kid in there. I think those are areas where you can really have a success. Mike Elston has had some good GAs. They had Larry Black a couple years ago. Remember him, Vince? He was a GA under Mike Elston. Mike Elston would let him coach to certain like the D tackles and stuff. He gave him that freedom.
Yeah.
And they have a great. I mean, I actually when it was looking like Mike Elston, some people were saying Mike Elston might leave this year and then last year. Larry Burlack's a guy that I would have looked at as the D-line coach. He's at Toledo right now because there's a lot of respect there. The kids loved him, but Mike Golson had to give him that opportunity to let him coach. Some coaches don't let GAs coach, and that was an issue the first couple years before Jeff Quinn got here. And so I'm glad that he changed that and let this GA coach. Harry Heastand took advantage of his GAs and let them do things. So I think that's what they do. But they'll coach. But then also they have a lot of away from their a lot of GAs will also have to be used. So you may work with like individuals, but then when you go to team, the GA's not with the offense. Like the O-line GA's not with the offense. He's over there on scout team making sure that the GAs over there are getting coached. Or you may have your offensive GAs work with the scout team defense to make sure that so there's two different ways that you can do it. And but that's an important role because that guy has to know what the opponent is doing and making sure that you're giving the right looks and different things like that, making sure the scout guys are prepared to go execute and do what you need them to do. And so the GAs will have a role in that, which again, very important role. I mean, that was one of the things I remember my first year as a coach is it was my job to get the scout team defense ready. Mm-hmm. And so I had to watch film, break down film, talk to the assistant coaches. Hey, what are you looking for today? And you have to give them looks. I still say one of my favorite memories was when I was at Wittenberg my first year, and Coach Fincham says, he's like, I just want you to throw everything at us today because we're going to play a team that just did a lot of blitzes. And so, I mean, I just was inventing blitzes, right? And it's just like on Wednesday, he was like, okay, Brian, we can run base defenses now. Hey, you told me to do this. You know what I mean? Because we're like,
don't unleash the hounds if you don't want it,
But it was pretty funny. But no, they'll do that. And a lot of GAs, if you have a good staff and you hire a good GA, you'll let them be involved in recruiting to a degree. Nick Lazinski was very involved in recruiting when he was a GA. Obviously there's certain rules that you can and can't do. A GA can't go on the road, things like that.
They can be on campus.
Right. So different things like that. So, and they'll do some scouting. But now with analysts, you have an analyst do a lot of that advanced scouting. And so the GAs will be more about, breaking down some will, hey, look, I need the third down tape. What I mean by that is when I was pass game coordinator, I had to do all of it. We didn't have GAs,
right?
But I'd go cut up the film and I want to watch this third and short, and I just want to evaluate what they're doing on third and short, and then what are they doing on third and medium? What are they doing third and long? What's their goal line films? I mean, you have the GAs a lot of times will do a lot of that stuff. Now you have like video coordinators and stuff now, and they'll cut a lot of that up. But then the GA's got to sort it and study it and do all that kind of stuff. Put together scouting reports of the opposition, and do a lot of that kind of stuff. So then you hand it to your coach, and then he's got to be the one to lead them through it. And sometimes if you have a really good GA, you may let him lead the meetings at times, and give him an opportunity to say, hey, look, you need to go through the personnel with them today in the meeting today, right? And but that's only if you have a guy that you trust. Mm-hmm. So
it's a big if, but I mean, you're usually involved in the hiring.
Yeah.
So
that's a great question though. I mean, I like questions like this because it's different than the normal, like, hey, we've answered this question. There's some questions we get like almost every show. Right. And that's okay. Which
is fine.
Because not everybody listens to every show. So you may not have heard the question. Right. It's not like you've heard me say it 4 days in a row and you want to hear me say it again. Unless there are people like, I'll see how many times I can get them to answer this question differently. But which would be kind of fun, some mind games. But no, it's a great question because we don't talk about things like that very often. And again, it's going to be different at every school. And some coaches, some coaches who I don't think are good coaches don't value GA. So it's like, hey, go run, get us coffee, go run, get us lunch, go run and get us donuts and stuff like that, which I think those kind of coaches I root for them to lose. So I don't like guys like that.
Fair enough. Brandon says, word has it the BK has pretty much taken over the Shrouth recruitment, been reaching out to him personally, trying to sway him back to the Irish's favor. True test of BK's recruiting skills.
Yeah. I'm just glad that he's doing it.
Yes.
If that's
that
true,
wouldn't have been the case in the past.
I don't know that. I haven't personally been told that, but if somebody's reporting that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And this is what we've been begging Brian Kelly to do for years. I'm ready to move on.
Okay.
Brandon wasn't really asking the question. He was making a comment.
Yeah.
I think it was a great comment. I absolutely agree with him 100%.
Brian and Vince, this is from Michael. Do you anticipate any additional offensive line transfer since the kid from Marshall is here now?
No, I think it's too late for transfers now.
Not this year.
And I think that Notre Dame has told Notre Dame hasn't told any other guys, hey, he's here, he's starting, you have no chance. I mean, they're saying, look, If you want to play, beat him out.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said before, I think that if Andrew Kristofic or Quinn Carroll or Zeke Correll comes into fall camp and they just flat out beat out Kane Madden, then that kid's going to play. I just don't know if they're going to be developed to the point where they can do that or necessarily be given the chance to do that per se. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
Tommy wants to know if there's any update on Moss.
Not from what we said before. I mean, he's going to take his visits and his recruitment's going to go into the fall. He did an unofficial in Alabama recently. He's going to take a lot of visits. That one's not even close to being over. No, the visit, we did talk about the visit afterwards, Tommy, and Notre Dame did a good job. It's just there's just not as much optimism about where they stand with him. He's a bit of a reserved kid. And again, he's not in decision-making mode. And usually kids that aren't close to being in decision-making mode aren't as necessarily – okay, I got to soak up every single second because if he likes Notre Dame, he's going to come back for a game. It won't be an official, but he'll come back for a game this fall if he really likes Notre Dame. And if he doesn't, then that's going to say a lot about where Notre Dame stands with him.
Liam Gaming says, "What did they say to the 3 Wisconsin kids?" I mean, gee whiz.
That's a great question.
I thought that was great
because I mean Notre Dame was look they definitely led for Billy Schrauth.
Right.
And they were.
You were very confident on Billy Schrauth.
And we'll get into that story someday. But yeah, very confident in Billy Schrauth.
I felt
for a while that Carson Hinsman in Notre Dame was the co-leader. I thought they were at worst co-leader. And then coming out of both of their visits, it's like, okay, this isn't good. Something's faded. I don't know what's happening in the visits. I don't want to guess, but it's a bad sign. And we saw with Jake Taylor, they made no movement with Jake Taylor. Right? I mean, so all these kids that they're going to get on campus this summer on the offensive line, right now it's not looking like they're going to get any of them except Ashton Craig, maybe Emil Wagner, but that's not even a given.
Right.
So that's problematic. That's problematic for sure.
Michael says, "I remember not that long ago when it seemed like the team couldn't stay healthy. Now this stretch of seemingly good health is great." That's referring to we were talking about the improvements and things along that nature and the health.
I mean,
of the team.
2 words, Matt Bayless.
Yeah.
I mean, this is no disrespect like Rob Hunt and the trainers, but trainers and people like that are dealing with problems that are there for the most part. I mean, there's some things that they'll have input on making sure, preventative things, but this boils down to first and foremost your strength and conditioning program. And that's where the issues that I have with Paul Longo. It's like they're not reaching their full potential. They're not as strong as they should be. They get bullied too much. I mean, Stanford straight up bullied Notre Dame.
Yeah.
In what, 3 of the first 4 years they played?
Yep.
Right? 4 of the first 5 years they played. Even the year that Notre Dame beat Stanford in 2012 and 2014, they didn't. I mean, they scored what, 17 points in one of the wins and 20 in the other in overtime, right? Something like that. Where that was a strength conditioning deal. And when your strength conditioning program is good, your kids are going to not be injured as much. And then the injuries that you do have are going to be ones that there's nothing you can do about. Like, There's nothing they could do about Sean Crawford's injuries. There's nothing they could do about Tommy Kramer's back. There's nothing they could do about a kid who has weaker joints and, torn ACLs. Sure. And I mean, there's nothing you can do about that to a degree. I mean, you'll have more of those if you don't have a great strength program, because if you're not building the right muscles to then make your ligaments stronger, I mean, that's all that goes into it. Like if you're just at the gym, like powerlifting and all that, you're going to be big and strong, but you're going to have shoulder problems because you're not getting the joints like around.
There's no flexibility. There's no.
Not only that, but like you have to get the muscles. Like, so if I'm doing things that are making my biceps big, but I'm not doing things that are also making these muscles and these muscles and these muscles strong, I may be like a beast at the beach, and like girls may like that, I guess, but I'm not going to be a very good football player, and I'm going to get hurt all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you have to be able to build the whole thing up, and that's where the strength and the durability. Plus, you also need to make sure that you're like you said, Vince, the flexibility piece. You got to be able to. If you're like really like a muscle bound guy, I used to joke like, okay, I dare you to touch your nose. You know what I mean? But there's no flexibility there.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. It's just like you like to joke with those guys because you're jealous. I'm jealous.
I'm jealous. Yeah.
But the point is that they don't have that level of that range of flexibility. So if they get extended a little bit more, like one guy may get extended here and shoulder goes, where another guy may get ripped all the way back and he's fine because he's got strong strength around those core parts so you can protect those tendons and ligaments and those kind of things. And so a good strength and conditioning program is essential to success. Which is why when Nick Saban lost that Cochran guy, right? Where did he go? Like Georgia or something like that? I forget where he went. I forget where he went. When they lost, he became an assistant coach somewhere. Maybe Georgia. I don't know. When they lost him, he went and got the guy that Matt Balis brought with him to Notre Dame, David Blue, who then went to Indiana. And even though he's at Bama now, the what he did while he was at Indiana has played a big role in what Indiana has become. It's not a coincidence that after Indiana tapped into what Notre Dame was doing, all of a sudden Indiana starts playing better football. Right. It's not a coincidence, and it's not a coincidence that Nick Saban went and got that guy. And so, I think that's a very important part. I mean, if you don't have that, your football program will never reach its full potential.
All right, I want to hit 2 comments here. I'm skipping down just 3 good things here. But Chad says, my dad always said, if you can't pee out my back door, I don't want to live there.
What?
No, that was from before when you're talking about your dogs and the child abuse and all that. I thought that was great.
Okay.
And then Brian says, Vinny, a child has went to the bathroom in your backyard, even if you didn't want to.
It's fine if they do that. I mean, that's cool. I mean, it happens. But what I'm saying is I can just tell my children, because they're dogs, to just go into the backyard to go to the bathroom. I only feed them once a day. My wife feeds them once a day, and then it is what it is. You do that as a parent, you're losing your children. The state is now taking over the parenting of that child.
Which that's like a vacation though, so whatever. But anyway, so it is 3:00. I have to put grades in, so I have to jet, and I'll just put it out there. I'm not going to be on the shows next week because I'm going on vacation with my family. Pray for me. 900 square foot house with 7 of us.
5 children in how big of a house? 900
square feet. So
this may be Vince's last show at Irish Breakdown ever.
Because I may be eaten alive.
Or he's going to be. I'm not to have him committed when he gets back from his visit.
And I'm not going to say we're going to the beach because I've learned that I'm not alled to do that.
You can go if it's a real beach. You can certainly say that. I mean,
it's not a real beach. So
then you say what? Okay. Then you say you're going to the beach. You say you're going to the lake.
Going to the lake.
Okay, that's what you say.
The lake. Yes.
Right. Okay. Good.
There's sand around, but that's all I got. All right. So see you guys later. Have a great week, and I will catch maybe next Friday. Maybe we'll see.
He may cut his family vacation so she can be here for the mailbag.
Just saying. I mean, it's priorities.
My guy.
See everybody.
My guy. Brian Chisanik said, actually, this is a comment. Visited Notre Dame a month ago and had the pleasure of meeting Jason Adamiola. Great time. Also love the work y'all do. Hardest working duo on the beat. Yes, Jason and Justin are really good kids and come from a great family. I am not surprised at all that you had a chance to meet one of them and came away very impressed. They're really good kids. And I think he's going to be a beast this year at Notre Dame. Allison T says, do you foresee Pine or Buckner starting the 2022 season? I honestly don't have an opinion on that, Allison. I think it depends. I mean, if I'm being honest, I hope that it's Tyler Buckner simply because Tyler has the greater ceiling. And if he wins the job, it tells me that he is the player that I hope he can be. But I keep saying this, I am not and would not discount Drew Pine if I were you or me or anybody else. Drew Pine is a really, really good football player. But if Drew Pine wins the job and beats Tyler Buckner out, I'm good with that. Notre Dame's going to be really good. He's a really good football player. But I think that Tyler Buckner certainly has the higher ceiling. And at the end of the day, you want your higher ceiling guy to pan out. You don't play him because he has more talent. You hope that the more talented guy plays better. And there were certainly some things I saw from Tyler Buckner in the spring that have me optimistic that he's going to see a jump as he gets more experience. But he's got to prove it. He's got to prove it. All right, let's get some questions. David Knight says, 2013 to 14, decimated by injuries. The strength coach was let go. Nutrition should not be that difficult. The trick is to make the healthy food somewhat satisfying and edible. So really, David, the strength and conditioning thing, the same thing happened in 2015 and 2016. If you remember, by the end of 2015, Notre Dame was really beat up. CJ was hurt. Sheldon was hurt. Teron Jones was hurt. Joe Schmidt was hurt. You had Kavari Russell was banged up. I mean, they were a banged up team because the strength program was not good. And that was one of the things I talked about that offseason. And then, of course, the next year we saw what happened. And so the nutrition aspect has changed and gotten way better at Notre Dame. It's just not where it needs to be compared to other programs is really what I'm referring to. They don't provide as many meals as other top programs. They don't have quite the supplement situation of other programs. And that's really what I'm referring to. Now, it's way better than it was. It just needs to continue to get better, in my opinion. Nathan Lytle says, have you heard anything about the Zach Rice visit? So it's 3:00 on Friday, Nathan. That means he's been on campus for just a few hours. It is way, way too early for me to have any intel. I mean, he's probably just now getting into the introductory type of meetings and things like that. So it's really early for that. Let's see here. Tyler Dijak says, Ronnie Stanley was a 3-star recruit. Don't get hung up on stars. Trust the coaches. I don't think that's accurate. I know that Rivals had him as a top 200 recruit, and I believe 247 Sports did as well. 247 Sports had him ranked number 145 in the country. Rivals had him at like 170 or something like that. I'm going to see what ESPN ranked him. All righty. I'm going to try to find his ESPN ranking. And remember, he was a really good basketball player too. So I'm going to have to try to find his ESPN ranking here. If you just give me a quick second. And he was ranked an unranked 4-star by ESPN. So as usual, ESPN has no clue how to rank offensive linemen. They did the same thing with Quentin Nelson. But to your point, there have been a lot of 3-star recruits that have turned out to be really good players at Notre Dame, especially offensive linemen. So I agree with your premise, Tyler. I don't disagree with your premise at all. I just, with Ronnie Stanley specifically, that wasn't accurate. Patrick Barnes says, "This is just me. When I watch tape of Jack Cohn, he seems to go through all his reads and hit the open man as opposed to Book, who locked in onto his guy." Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I think that's something that's been a bit of an issue at Notre Dame for a few years. And I think it's more about the head coach than it has been about the coordinators. And I think there's just there has been a way too much of guys just being afraid to make a mistake going on in Notre Dame. And that's why you've seen quarterbacks play better when they were younger. And then the longer they were in the system, the less willing to take chances and be mistake free. I mean, just, be okay to make a mistake, but you're still taking chances, still being aggressive. We saw that really go away. And, I think that's more of a head coaching problem than anything. But to your point, what I like about Jack Cohn, and part of the reason I'm optimistic about Jack Cohn is because honestly, if I'm and again, this isn't a shot at Tommy Rees, more of a shot at Brian Kelly. Not even a shot. It's just an honest observation is the fact that he's been developed for 4 years by somebody else is a positive. Whereas now he's a veteran, it's just go run the offense. And I think that should be helpful for him and helpful for the offense. And part of the reason I'm very optimistic at all. Or I am very optimistic about him. And Michael says, I live in Allentown. I didn't know you were here. Cool. Yes. Michael, can you help me with something? So I coached at Muhlenberg. I've been trying to remember the name of this sandwich place where you could get hogs. They called them hogs. And it was not too far from Muhlenberg. It was kind of like, kind of going towards the downtown part. And I can't for the life of me remember the name of that place. If you live in Allentown, could you please remind me? Or if you know what that place is, tell me what that name of that place was. But I did. I enjoyed Allentown. Muhlenberg was one of my favorite, if not my favorite place to coach. I liked Allentown. It was a small little town, but it was a nice town. It was a clean town, really good people. And the kids at Muhlenberg when I was there were awesome. I mean, there were so many good kids. I had so much fun with them. And, I still talk to my running backs from that team. One of my fullbacks was actually one of the groomsmen in my weddings. Big Notre Dame fan, by the way. And I loved that. I mean, I loved Christopher Newport. I still talk to kids from there too. But that was probably my favorite place was at Muhlenberg. From just the town and just the kind of players that I got a chance to deal with. All righty, get some more questions now. Okay. All right, Allison T. How does a coaching staff tell a recruit that they don't want to take his commitment? I think there's a couple ways this can go. When you offer a kid I think a lot of this and to me, the best way to do this, Allison, is just honesty. Hey, listen, we want to bring you in. We want to visit. We want to do this. We want to do that. But look, we're not in a position yet where we're ready to take a commitment. And there's one of two reasons. One is we're still sorting out our board, which is something a lot of coaches will say. And or two is, we have a couple kids that we've been on a little longer that we want to see how things play out. And we want to allow them to make their decision first, or at least see how things are going on their visit before we take a commitment from you. I think where you can get in trouble, Allison, is when you aren't honest with a kid. So you don't tell him you will or won't take his commitment. You just offer him, hey, we love you. And then he comes and then he loves the visit and he wants to commit. And it's like, whoa, time out. If you get to that point and you got to tell the kid you're not taking his commitment at that point, good chance you're going to lose him, And so I think it's just about about being honest first and foremost before the visits, when you offer things like that, and just say, hey, look, we're not looking to take a commitment right now. We want to get, so we got 8 kids we want to get on campus. We want to get all of them on campus before we make some decisions and things like that, and then go from there. And I think if you do that, then you can maintain that relationship, and you can also maintain your integrity. Anna Guzman says, and also another student studying at Notre Dame who rushed the field too, love talking about your show with my Notre Dame alum dad. We're both super excited for the season coverage too. So that's another Notre Dame student that we have in here. Appreciate you being part of it, Anna, and love the fact that you and your dad can bond over our show. That's awesome. I have to let Vince know about that one. Vince, I see you're down there. Can you still hear the show? Did you hear what Anna said? So yeah, Vince can still hear the show. That's really awesome. So welcome to it. I'm so excited you're a part of what we're doing here. And I'm also glad you were one of those students to rush the field. That was an awesome moment. I don't care what anybody in the national media said about it after the fact. That was awesome. Props to the Notre Dame students. Matthew Lass says, hey guys, what's the highest number of viewers you've seen in a show? I've only been watching a couple weeks, but it seems like the numbers are growing fast. Good for you guys. This is great content. Yeah. I mean, Vince and I were talking about this. Was it yesterday, Vince, where we're shocked at how much the show has grown. Like when we first started talking about really making a commitment to this in January, we were saying we hope we can get monetized by August. That was our goal. We were hoping we could get enough subscribers and get enough watch hours to be monetized by August. When we really kicked it off in sort of like mid to late January, making a push, we were monetized by mid-February. I mean, it just was amazing. And all of this growth, the cool thing about all this growth has happened in the off season. And that's what's been so exciting about it. And it's been because of you guys. And somebody asked me, like, why do you keep doing 3-hour-long shows? I'm like, because nobody leaves. Our numbers stay the same. People keep asking questions. If we only had an hour-long worth of questions, we would only have hour-long shows. And so I think that's the thing that I love and we so appreciate and are so thankful for all of you. But to answer your first part of your question, I mean, when we first started doing this, we would have, if we got to 100, we were like super pumped. I mean, and now it's like, if we are under 100, we're like, man, we only had 110 people on the show today, man. That's kind of a bummer. We had a recruit. Was it the post? I think it was the post, the visit for this past weekend. So the Monday show got over 300 for a little bit at that time. Now, I don't know if these numbers are good or bad. I have no clue what other people are doing on shows, but for us, it's fun and exciting and been a lot of fun. And I hope that someday we're looking back, like, you remember when we were excited about being at 300? Remember that? Ha ha ha. I hope we get to that point in time, but if we don't, so what? I mean, it's just fun and we enjoy it. And yes, we want to grow and we want to, it's still a business. And so we want to make money and we want to do all those kind of things, but this is a lot of fun and we enjoy it. And we have people that, same Matthew, you and I were going back and forth the other day. That's fun. I enjoy doing that stuff. And if we can grow and you all are sharing with your friends and other Notre Dame friends, like Anna was talking about how her and her dad, talk about the show. I love that stuff, and I'd love for the shows to be huge because I just would love to be able to bring as many Notre Dame fans together as possible. And that's the fun part about it. Andrew Gross says, I can't wait to see Fisher. So Vince, this was in response to the question we had earlier about which players are most looking forward to seeing. I talked about Lawrence Keys. Vince talked about Blake Fisher, and Andrew agrees with Vince. I'm never going to forgive you for this, Andrew. All right, I'm now officially out of tea. All right, Nathan Lytle says, why would the Notre Dame staff go from having Bradshaw visit in the fall to planning to have him on campus next week, and now he isn't coming at all? It makes no sense to me when he clearly has a lot of talent. I think there's been more to it than them just canceling the visit. I think it was something that was, to me, rushed. And they didn't do a good enough job of preparing for it ahead of time. They tried to rush it. It didn't work out. And they're still saying they're going to bring him in the fall. But I still think he was a plan B, even when they were going to bring him in this weekend. And I think that's a mistake, in my opinion. That's a mistake. He needs to be a plan A guy. He needs to be a guy that they should have brought in this weekend and taken a commitment from this weekend. They didn't, and it is what it is. And, we'll see. But hopefully next year they overcome it and they go out and get some guys that have similar talent or maybe even better talent and go there. But that was a frustration for me. Andrew Goss says Fisher should have been a 5-star all around. I I didn't have him as a 5-star. Number one, I think that Blake had 5-star upside, and I gave him a 5-star upside grade. But there were parts of Blake's game that still needed work. And there were other linemen that were a little more advanced than he was, and that's where that current grade comes from. Just because a guy has 5-star talent doesn't mean he should necessarily be a 5-star. The reason Blake is playing so well now and so we're excited about now is because he put in work to better his body, to rearrange his body, to get in better shape, to improve his technique and all those kind of things. He's not just the same guy that he was in high school. He's gotten a lot better. The talent was always there, but I'm okay with it. Rivals had him as a 5-star, so kudos to them. I had him as a 4.5-star. He was very close to being a 5-star, but there was enough things about his game that, his grade was just outside being a 5-star. He was still my number one player, and I don't give out a ton of 5-stars. I think 247 had him outside the top 100. ESPN had him way out of the top 100. That's just the ESPN rank. I don't think ESPN had any clue how to evaluate offensive linemen at all. It's consistently bad. Got some Tupac quotes in here. I appreciate that very much. All righty. All right, we've got a lot of Tupac quotes in here. I love it. My dad's going to hate it, but I love it. And Vince has no clue what you're talking about. Okay. Brian Denbo says, please tell me I'm not the only one with the CD book in the back seat. I don't know if I used to have that, but my CD player doesn't work as well anymore. And honestly, I don't drive my car enough to even turn the radio on. So usually when I'm driving nowadays, I get on the phone and talk to somebody, or I'll, catch up with my parents. Cause sometimes it's the only time I have to make for talking to my mom or dad. But yeah, I got like 6 or 7 CDs on my visor, but I haven't carried the CD book in a while. I've got them like right over there downstairs in the basement in my office area, but I don't have them in the car anymore. All right, here we go. Some more question, more stuff here. Here we go. I think we got to that question. Paul Argentieri says, Brian, have you had any opportunity to review the type of offense Notre Dame ran in their 1973 championship as Indy struggles in short run situations with the spread? I don't think Notre Dame struggles in short yardage situations with the spread. I remember we had this conversation back in 2014. I was having this debate with some people, and they were like, Notre Dame's not good enough in short yardage situations. So then I went and did a breakdown, and Notre Dame was actually better in short yardage situations than Alabama was that previous year. But it's Notre Dame did it with running and throwing. I don't think, especially last year, I don't think Notre Dame had issues with third and short. I don't think that's an issue at all. I don't think Notre Dame has any issues in the goal line. When Notre Dame got to the goal line, they punched it in. That they just did. I think the issue has been other things. I don't think short yardage is an issue. When Notre Dame gets near the goal line or gets short yards, they put 3-4 tight ends in the game, and they line up that way. They don't spread the field and do those kind of things. They did those things with Brandon Wimbush in 2017, and that was, in my opinion, a big reason why Notre Dame was so good running the ball that year, because they'd run read zone, and if you overplayed Brandon or overplayed the run, Brandon would pull it, and he would kind of go that way. So I just don't think that it's the spread is an issue, and I've had this kind of conversation with people before when they talk about when you get in the goal line, you've got to be, the spread doesn't work. And I'm, yeah, it does. It works for Ohio State. Ohio State never goes under center. Florida, when they had Tim Tebow, never went under center. When Urban Meyers hardly ever uses quarterbacks under the center. I just don't think it's a big issue. I think it's about execution. It's about leverage. I think that's an area where RPOs are effective. If you want to load up the box, we're going to pull it and throw it. I think spreading the field can work in any non-goal line down and distance, in my opinion. And I could point to teams that are great on third down and short yardage that do that. Michael says, well, I coached girls fast pitch tournament ball, and I would have a parents meeting to set the how-tos to recruitment. Totally agree with you, Brian. Yes, I'm glad that you do agree. Nathan Lytle says, do you guys think that any of the linebackers we have on the team now are committed can be the next Manti or Jalen Smith or better. I don't think anyone's going to be better than Jalen Smith as a talent. I mean, I think Jalen Smith was one of the best, arguably the most physically talented linebacker in all of college football in the last decade. Are there guys that could be as productive or more productive than Jalen? I hope so, because Jalen's production never matched his talent because of Brian Van Gorder. Can they be Manti or Jalen? I don't know about that. I think that's pretty high expectation. I don't expect any of the linebackers to be the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. I don't expect any of them to be a top 5 draft pick, which is what I think Jalen would have been. But to me, I'm not honestly, Nathan, there's nothing wrong with your question at all. I just don't think that is something I think too much about. What I care more about is as a unit, whether it's 2 linebackers in the field or 3 linebackers in the field or 4 linebackers in the field, that you have athletic guys that are instinctive and can make plays. And even if you have 3, if you have 3 Drew Tranquils on the field, you're going to have a really good linebacking core. If you have a Jalen Smith and he's got a Joe Schmidt 2015 version next to him, I don't care if you got Jalen Smith. You're still not going to have a great linebacking core. If you go look at Manti in 2012, Manti was great. But when they played some of the, Alabama and they could kind of take Manti out of the game, Notre Dame struggled because they didn't have a great linebacking core. They had a great linebacker, but not a great linebacking core. What Notre Dame had in 2018 and to a degree in 17, but more so in 2018, is they didn't have a Manti Te'o or a Jalen Smith, but they had 2 really good linebackers. I think when you look at 2019, there was nobody in the same league as Jalen or Manti. But Asmar had double-digit tackles for loss. Drew White had a good year in the lineup. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah had a good year in the lineup. So I would argue that linebacker group was better than the 2012 and the 2015 linebacker groups, even though there was no one individually in the same league as Manti or Jalen. And I care more about those things than necessarily having that one great player. The ideal scenario, however, to your question, Nathan, is that you have that kind of group and also one stud that raises above. So, who are guys that could become that on the current roster? I don't know if there's anyone on the current roster that could be that inside. I think Prince Collie maybe could be that guy on the outside. I think Jack Kaiser could be a really impact player on the outside to the level of Jalen and Manti. No. In the current group, the 2 guys to me that have the highest ceiling that could potentially be inside linebackers is Josh Burnham and Jalen Sneed. Those 2 guys are it for me. Those are the 2 guys I look at and say, if those guys reach their full potential, they're going to be All-Americans. Will they be Jalen or Manti? I don't know. Could they be a Butkus Award winner? Yeah, absolutely. I could absolutely see that. No question about it. Brian Meadows says, hey, Brian, do you think they should practice in weather more so they could be ready for rainy games? I think there are ways to replicate wet balls that you don't need to go outside. I think the problem is going outside because of the type of practices are different than games. There are disadvantages to playing out in the rain. I'm okay practicing inside as long as, especially if you have a turf field or a field turf field. I think that even more so. I think the key, however, is you need to make sure that you're practicing with wet balls, especially for a quarterback. I think those things are more important because if you practice in rain and then it doesn't rain on Saturday, then you haven't got good work in. It could be a great, we've seen this before, especially living in Indiana. Anyone that lives in northern Indiana knows this. There's been weeks where Notre Dame had rainy Saturdays, but it was beautiful all week. And then there's been weeks where it was rained all week and it looks beautiful on Saturday. So you got all this rain work in and you didn't need it. I do think there are times when you think there's going to be rain that weekend that you need to make sure you're practicing with wet balls for your quarterback to make sure that you're able to wet footballs to make sure that you're able to go out there and be prepared for that. Chad Williams says, when does Singleton commit? After his visits are over, and he's got another one this weekend. He was at Texas A&M, and I believe he's going to be visiting Bama this weekend. So I think he'll commit. I think he'll commit sometime in July. I think look, another thing too we have to consider with this whole thing is a lot of these kids are talking more and more and more about waiting because everything has been so rushed and condensed. Like they couldn't go anywhere for a month and a half. Now they got to go to all these schools in a real short period of time. They can only go to 4 or 5 of them. And there may be kids that want to see more places. They may want to say, you know what, this is all rushed. I haven't had time. It's overwhelming. These are 16 to 18-year-old kids. And so I think some of them are wisely deciding, like, I really want to think this through. And that's why you're going to see more commitments in July, public commitments in July. Singleton, I still feel really good about where things stand with Notre Dame. Maybe that changes and they end up, Penn State ends up beating them. But I feel really good about where they're at right now. All right, Brandon, I believe I talked about this earlier. Good question. So, yeah, Brian, have you heard anything about Morrison's recruitment? Seemed like a near lock to Notre Dame, that is accurate. And now it seems his commitment is up in the air. I'm feeling uneasy. You should feel uneasy. I think Washington's done a great job of getting back in there and making a push. And Jimmy Lake, here's the thing that we have to understand about Jimmy Lake. Notre Dame versus Washington should be considered a no-brainer in a lot of ways. But if you're a DB, it can be hard to say no to Jimmy Lake. And if anyone doesn't understand why, I would encourage you to go to this website, www.drafthistory.com. And in the top left, you can pick colleges. Go to Washington and look at how many DBs they've put in the NFL since Jimmy Lake has arrived. It's a very high number. And so if you're a kid like that and you look and say, I can understand why a kid from the West Coast and Jimmy Lake's a great recruiter. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm happy about it if they lose Benjamin Morrison, and it doesn't mean that it's excusable per se, but it's understandable. You're going to lose these battles sometimes. And I don't know if the staff could have done anything different. Jimmy Lake's a force. And as I said last week, until they start putting more DBs in the NFL, especially in the higher parts of the NFL draft, this is going to continue to be a problem for Notre Dame. Andrew Goss says, I think the running back is going to get a lot of work receiving this year. Andrew, I agree with you. I think they should. I think that Notre Dame running backs have unique skills. The current group have unique skills in the pass game that should be utilized. I agree with you 100%. I think we could see scenarios where Notre Dame goes two backs and and a tight end, and they end up in a spread look, or two tight ends and two backs, and you think it's going to be a heavy personnel, and next thing you know, Notre Dame's in four wide or empty because of the unique things that those kids can do, not just at receiver but also at tight end. And so I agree with you. I mean, if Notre Dame's running backs don't catch at least 50 to 60 passes this year, I'm going to be bitterly disappointed. And not just a bunch of checkdowns. I mean, that's part of it too. I like checkdowns, but not just a bunch of checkdowns. But where you're making a concerted effort to get your backs involved in the run game, I think that'd be very important. Because again, to your point, and Andrew followed up with this, have to respect both Notre Dame tight ends. If you're respecting those tight ends, then you hurt them with the backs. If then they have to respect the backs, then you can hurt them with the tight ends and the slots, and you can take some shots outfield. And that's just kind of how it all, how it all goes. So we have now come up with, here we go. So now it's not even let it play out. It's just, what is this, lipo? I don't think we're going to say that. Okay. But it's no longer even about let it play out. But yes, no question about it. All righty. Let's see here. Allison, updates on Anthony Lucas. No, it's like we said when he visited, he's going to take visits and sit down and think about what he wants to do next then, whether that means taking more visits in the fall or start getting in decision-making mode. But he is going to be, I believe he has another visit scheduled this weekend. He's going to take his visits and let it play out. Get 'em Rock says, people in Virginia don't really care about the Redskins anymore. Or 20 years ago we did. I can only speak for my family in Southern Virginia. My entire family were fans of the Redskins, and they didn't stop caring about the Redskins until last year. That's when they stopped caring about the National Football League. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So they're not fans of the Washington football team. There you go. All righty. Brandon says, who's going to be the coach to bring Virginia Tech back to an ACC national contender? I don't think it's going to be Fuentes. I agree with you on that. I thought it was a good hire. It was a weird hire, though. Like, Virginia's a weird state in that, kids have no problem leaving the state, but there's a group of kids that would like to stay in state, but only if it's a coach that they view as, I don't know, kind of more relatable to them. And that's why a lot of kids love playing for Frank Beamer. That's why Mike London was able to recruit anywhere he's gone, because he is loved in the state of Virginia. And he's at William and Mary now doing well. But, even when he wasn't winning at Virginia, he was able to still get recruits because he's so respected. I don't think there's really any kids in Virginia that I want to go to Virginia Tech and play for Justin Fuente. If they make a good hire, and, it could get interesting is if here's what could get, and this is just me talking, right? This isn't like anything I have any intel on it. But if Shane Beamer is successful at South Carolina, I wonder if he'd be willing to go back to Virginia Tech and coach now. And I could see it because you're not going to have him replace his dad. That would have been foolish and stupid, and he needs to get some experience and all those kind of things. But now you've kind of had that buffer between his dad and who was a great coach, and I had tons of respect for Frank Beamer. And that's in the past now. You've had Fuente there for a number of years. If he gets fired, do you bring Shane back? That would be very interesting to see if he'd be even willing to do that. But I do know Frank Beamer is still very much involved with Virginia Tech. But I think if they get a young, energetic coach, and it doesn't have to be someone that's a Power 5 guy, it could be someone who's from an FCS school or something like that, but who really understands how important it is to just recruit the heck out of the state of Virginia, then I think Virginia Tech could get back to being I don't know about national title contender. I mean, the only time Virginia Tech was ever truly a national title contender was when Michael Vick was there. I mean, like truly, where he actually thought they could win it. And I mean, he was a unicorn. I mean, guys like that don't come along very often for anybody, much less a place like Virginia Tech. And a big part of the reason he went to Virginia Tech was because of Ronald Curry, because nobody knew as much about Michael Vick because of how good Ronald Curry was. John Kesmerick says, still puzzled Michigan is having success with recruiting, knowing Harbaugh most likely will not be back in 22. I don't think they necessarily think that. I mean, we're fans. We follow it. We see that. But most of these recruits don't follow it the way that we do. And there's some good young assistant coaches there. And, I mean, their recruiting's going okay, but it's not – I mean, if put it like this, if Notre Dame had Michigan's recruiting class right now, these podcasts would be taking a much more angry tone by me and a lot of you all, I have a feeling. Ogre897 says, Randy Moss was just insane to watch live at Marshall. I wish I could have seen Randy Moss play live in college. And even more so, I wish we could have seen him do it in a Notre Dame uniform. But I mean, he's exciting to watch on TV. I can only imagine how good he was in college, especially that one year where he was playing against FCS opponents. Oh, my goodness. That was just insane. Insane. All righty. John Wynn says Notre Dame needs a senior running back because when I watched the RB carry the ball versus Virginia Tech, he was super good. No joke. Yeah. They've definitely got some really good backs. There's no question about it on this group. Gene Allen says, first live chat. Welcome, Gene. Glad you're part of it. Really enjoy listening to Irish Breakdown. Thank you for the insight. Appreciate you being part of it, Gene. Appreciate you making your comment and finally being able to make it live. So I appreciate that very much. Michael says, my choices are Jerome Bettis, Ricky Waters for Notre Dame, and Dan Marino, Tony Dorsett for Pitt. Those are both at Pitt. So I imagine that's the answer to the question of best players you've ever seen live. I also wonder if that would be a question about players in the modern game. Those both could fit well for either one. Ryan McCarty says all of the recruits love Bowden. Seems like he relates with them extremely well, and they all call him Coach Chad, which is kind of funny because he's not a coach. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of his job is to relate well to players. And from what I'm told, he's pretty good at that. So I've never had a chance to speak with him, but it sounds like what he was hired to do so far is going well. Dylan Riggin says, hey, Coach, do you think that Brian Kelly's willing to make any changes to the coaching staff should it arise, or since it's his last 4 years, do you believe he's locked into what he has? I don't think he's locked into what he has. I think Brian Kelly would make changes on the coaching staff if he felt needed. I just think what I would say is I don't think he's going to make the one change that I think potentially, if things don't go well this year, should be made, and that's offensive line. I think Jeff Quinn's going to be maybe I'll be wrong about this, but I don't see any way that Brian Kelly fires Jeff Quinn ever. I think Jeff Quinn can be at Notre Dame as long as Jeff Quinn wants to be at Notre Dame. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And I hope that I'm wrong about it because I hope that I'm wrong because Jeff Quinn gets the job done. That's what I ultimately hope happens. But if he doesn't get the job done, I don't see him making a move. But I think if other positions don't step up and do well, I could absolutely see him making a move. I don't think he's going to make one at that position. Mark 1 asks, how much do you think the Irish will run this year with all the talent they have? I don't know. Honestly, Mark, I don't really care much about run-pass ratios. I don't care about how much they're going to run. What I hope is that Notre Dame is explosive and efficient on offense, and they're explosive, efficient, running the ball, explosive and efficient passing the ball. And there's going to be some weeks where the way that teams are playing, you're going to go out and run for a ton of yards. And other weeks, maybe you don't run for a ton of yards. I do think that establishing the run is important in every game, but I'm also not someone who believes you have to run for 200 yards to win games or things like that. If the defense is playing in a way that you're just whipping them with the pass game, then keep whipping them with the pass game until they get out of it, and you can do something different. It's just about explosiveness and efficiency. And I think you can do that in the pass game. I think you can do that in the run game. I think that's going to be the key. But you have to, in my opinion, to be good at them in both. That's ultimately the goal. I mean, LSU didn't run for but 160 yards in 2019. I'm going to look that up actually right now. I think they ran for like 160 yards a game the year that they won the title and scored like 50 points a game. Let's see here. 166.8 yards per game, right? But their starting running back rushed for over 1,400 yards, and he averaged 6.6 yards per carry. So even though they didn't run for a ton of yards, they were explosive. They were efficient running the ball. And in some games when they needed to run the ball, they were able to run the ball. And I think that's important, and that's a big key to winning football games. And so, when they played Florida and beat Florida, they ran for over 200 yards. When they had a nice battle against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was scoring points that game, they were able to run the ball and win that game. But they didn't run for but 160 some yards in the semifinal in the championship game, but they were over 5 yards to carry both times. Efficient and explosive. And I think that's, but again, they were more of a pass-heavy team. Other teams that run the ball more and win championships. Clemson in 2018 was over 240 yards a game running the ball. Now, they could beat you with the pass game. They were efficient and explosive with the pass game, but then they were also explosive and efficient in the run game. And that's what happened against Notre Dame. Notre Dame dominated Clemson at the line of scrimmage, dominated them in the line of scrimmage. And they couldn't get the run game going early. And Trevor Lawrence was getting harassed, but they were explosive in the pass game. So even though they didn't hit a lot of plays in the pass game, the 5 big plays they hit were impactful in that game. And then eventually you get the lead. Notre Dame has to try to, change their defense to try to make stops. And that's when you open up the big run. And they padded some stats and made it look like they had greater success running the ball. But if you go watch the first 2 quarters of that game, Clemson couldn't run the ball in Notre Dame. And they could barely keep Trevor Lawrence in the pocket against Notre Dame. It's just they were able to hit some big plays. And so that's why explosiveness is key, but also efficiency is key. Getting yourself in some good 3rd and shorts or 2nd and shorts. Because if you can get into 2nd and 3 or 4 with consistency, you're going to be a really good offense. Because now I can take some shots down the field. I can do anything I want because I'm in a 3rd and medium, 3rd and short situation if it doesn't work. So I think that's really where you want to be as an offense. And whether they run it 50 times a game or 30 times a game, as long as they're efficient and explosive, I don't care what they do. I do think, however, that for Notre Dame to win a title, they're not going to win a title averaging 160 yards per rushing yards per game like LSU did in 2019 or like Clemson did in 2016. I just don't see it. Maybe if they get Deshaun Watson, a quarterback, they could get away with it, but I just don't see it. I don't think that Notre Dame's not, I don't think, is ever going to recruit to the level where that's going to work to a championship level. I just don't think it is. But I also don't think they need to run for 250 yards a game either. They just have to be efficient and explosive to do both. That, to me, is the key. Kai says, Jaylen Brown is my number 1 want in 2023. I mean, he's definitely up there. He's a dynamic player. Brian Denbo says, don't know how, but the phrase Reese's Pieces needs to be used. I think you need to do it properly, though, Brian. You need to get rid of that last E after the S in Reese to make it work out better. But yes, I do agree with that. All righty. John Wynn says, when was the last time that Notre Dame played Wisconsin? That is a good question. I'm going to look up here for you, John. The last time Notre Dame and Wisconsin played, they have not played since 1964. They have played 16 times in their history. Notre Dame has an 8-6-2 advantage. Wisconsin won the first 3 games, which were in 1900, 1904, 1905. Notre Dame got their first win in 1924 and then lost in 28 and then won 6 of the next 7 with a tie in 1942. They last played in 1944, which was a 28-13 Notre Dame win. They did not play again until 1962. Wisconsin won in 62 and 63. And then Notre Dame won 31-7 at Wisconsin in 1964. So the last time that they played was 1964. So that's a very, very good question. Ryan McCarty says, I know hindsight is 2020, but Asa Turner has been bad. Notre Dame surely wanted him out of high school, but since being at Washington, he's been a disappointment. And Ryan, I think that's because he's playing out of position. Notre Dame wanted him to play linebacker. They wanted him to play rover. Washington sold him on playing DB. Asa convinced himself he was a DB. And, like you said, he started for them, but I think he's going to get benched this year, or at least they're hoping he gets benched this year. And he got benched in the couple games they played last year. He didn't play well, but I think it's a situation where he's miscast. He should have come to come Notre Dame. He should have gone somewhere where he was going to develop into a linebacker. I mean, I could see him in like a Jack Kaiser role. He'd be much better in like a Jack Kaiser type of role, a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah type of role than he is as a safety. He was never a safety. I said it at the time, but Jimmy Lake convinced him that he was a safety just so they could get him there, and he hasn't played well there. Scott Wolfel says, and I appreciate this, Scott, very much. Brian, I appreciate all your hard work on Notre Dame. Love it. Offensive line and wide receiver positions concerns me. I'm wondering, when do you think we will start to hear how summer is going with those positions? So honestly, I just talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and he said, they got like another couple weeks left of summer ball. As we get closer to that, so we get through this recruiting period, early July, especially after that July 4th period, I'm going to do a lot of calls and reaching out to people to try to see how summer's going. So you can definitely look for some of that. And I'm hoping it's in time for our message board, so I can put some of those little nuggets start putting those onto the message board. So, yeah, that'd be good. Scott also says on the GA, who is the new O-line GA? Any background on him? I don't know anything about him other than he came, I believe, from Richmond, I think. I'll have to go look that up, but I don't know a whole lot about him, to be honest with you. Christopher Sally says, any early buzz on any of the summer enrollees? I mean, anyone who came to campus and the staff is like, wow, this kid is better than we thought. I haven't heard that yet. Honestly, Christopher, I've been trying to do with recruiting stuff. I have not really reached out. And the only nuggets that I've gotten so far are about veterans. So like I gave one yesterday. I've heard some really good things about Jacob Lacey, where he's in good shape. His shoulder's getting much better. So as I said, in early July, I'm going to start, and then kind of that first week and a half of July is when I'll hopefully be putting a lot of stuff out. But they're still like halfway through their summer period. I still think that there's still a lot we're going to learn. So Tommy asked, Brian, what was your biggest miss in both directions since you've stopped coaching? Are you referring to like what I miss about coaching, or are you referring to what like recruiting misses, like, or team, like what was a prediction that I missed? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, Tommy. So if you don't mind following up on that, I'd appreciate that. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Jack Sullivan says, what do you think the front seven could look like personnel-wise under Freeman this year? Jack, I think we're going to see a lot of 4-down personnel. I do. And early downs, I think there's going to be games, however, where we see a 3-3-5. I think a true 3-3-5, where we're going to see more DBs. I think the question that I have is, when they go to the 3-down look, are they going to drop the Viper and then just bump all the linebackers out? And so then your fifth DB is still a linebacker like Jack Kaiser, or do they go to a pure 3-3-5 and maybe have like, you put Foskey and Adamiola on the edge, and whether it's Heinisch or Tagovailoa at nose or whatever the case may be there. And then do you go to 3 linebackers inside, Kaiser, let's just say Drew White and Shane Simon, just for argument's sake. And then you put a 5th guy in it outside at DB as kind of that nickel. I think we could see a little bit of both. I think he's going to play a lot of personnel though. And from what I've been told, talking to sources, is he's very much into, we're going to line up a lot of different ways and we're going to play a lot of people. They're going to go 2 deep and across the board in the front 7, from what I'm told. So you're going to see strong 2 deep at the defensive line. You're going to see a lot of different looks, a lot of different personnel. He plans to take advantage of the talent that they have at Notre Dame, is what I'm told. Now, we'll see if that plays out or not, but that's what we're seeing. Eric 1863, enjoy the show. Relatively new listener, sticking with the hypothetical. How do you think the 2017 team would have done if Kaiser was the quarterback? I don't think they would have done very well. And the reason I say that is because, yes, he was a better passer than Brandon Wimbush, but he's a horrible leader, a really bad leader. There's a reason a kid with that kind of talent has done nothing in the NFL, and he's literally lost every game he's ever started in the NFL. Talent is only going to take you so far. I think the better question for me, Eric, would be, how would they have done if a healthy Malik Zaire would have been the quarterback in 2017? I think that'd be a better question. And we all know the limitations Brandon had as a passer that season, but I honestly think that Malik would have done better with that team if he was healthy than DeShone Kizer. And look, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I'm just telling you, I have talked to so many people that just said, Deshaun was just, it was just not who you wanted leading your football team. Now, having said that, if you were to say to me, Eric, hypothetical, so let me add to your hypothetical, right? How do you think the 2017 team would have done if Kizer was the quarterback after being humbled the previous season? If he'd have changed his attitude and be like, you know what, man, I was not acting right. I was not leading. I was doing wrong things the night before games. I was not the guy I should have been. I had an all me attitude. I wasn't who I needed to be. And Tommy Reese comes in and Chip Long comes in and they get his head on straight, then that team would have been really good. Right. So to your question, Deshaun had Deshaun to me was the most physically talented quarterback Notre Dame had under Brian Kelly. But there's 3 or 4 other guys I'd take over him just because leadership is such an important part of a quarterback position. And when you had a guy that very few people respect, you're not going to win as much. And I think that's why we saw Deshaun regress the way that he did. And he was horrible in the fourth quarter in 2016. They blew so many games and he was a part of that. He wasn't the only reason for it, but he was a part of it. But so if you gave me the premise that he kind of matured that offseason, which I don't know if he's even done yet in the NFL, then my answer would change. And that team would have they would not have lost to Miami, in my opinion. They wouldn't have. And I think they'd have beat Georgia. That team that could have been, and that's why I kind of got torn between 2017 and 2015 about the Brady Quinn question, because you start thinking boy, that team was, if they just had a quarterback who could complete some passes, man, they'd have been really good. And Deshaun at least could bring some. He wasn't as dynamic of a runner as Brandon was, but he was a good runner. He ran for over 900 yards in his 2 years in the lineup. And if he'd have played a full 2 years, because remember, he didn't take over till the third game of the year, then maybe he'd have gone over 1,000 in those 2 years. But he was a good runner, but he could really throw it. But I'd still say a healthy Malik would have been the guy that I would point to. And, they could have had both of those guys if, they'd handled things correctly the year before, or either one of those guys. But, obviously they didn't do that. All righty. How many commits will Notre Dame take in 2027? And don't say it's too early. 23. How about that? They'll take 23 commits in 2027. All righty. S. Coach, any concern that if Kerry Coombs moves on at Ohio State that they target Freeman? Do you think he would make that lateral move? I have no idea. He hasn't coached a single game. Look, I know he loves Ohio State. I know he loves his alma mater. I know he loves being from Ohio. That's why he's trying to recruit Ohio so much. But he hasn't coached a game at Notre Dame. I have no idea how he's going to feel about Notre Dame after coaching a season here. He's been here 6 months, 6.5 months. I'm assuming if that happened tomorrow, maybe he would think about it. But I just want to see how he's going to pan out. And I don't know if that would be a great move for him, just taking the away, because this Ryan Day's not going anywhere. So you go there, and I don't know how long he's going to be at Notre Dame. I'm going to enjoy it as long as he lasts. But if he likes it here, and they do right by him here, I don't think he's just going to leave just because his alma mater came calling. You don't see that a whole lot, to be honest with you. Omar Austin says, who are the guys, the breakout player for fall camp offense and defense? We're actually going to do a show on this, Omar, next week. I'm going to do a show on this. I'm trying to find some guests for next week that are going to talk about that. But we're going to do a show on this because there's 3 or 4 guys really on both sides of the ball that I look at. And, I think I've kind of given one away already early in the show, and that's Lawrence Keys. That's one guy that I'm really looking forward to. And I kind of gave one away on the other side of the ball when we were talking about guys I'm most excited seeing. It's Jack Kaiser and Jason Adamula. I think those are 3 guys that I could see really having breakout seasons, especially the two defensive guys. Michael Scheller, haven't seen this show for a while, Michael, so I'm glad that you're in today. I hope you're doing well. It says, Vincent Bryan, when might we see some of the dominoes begin to fall with the 2022 recruit? So I think we're going to start to see the dominoes fall, Michael, in that first week and a half in July. I think that is when you're going to see, because remember, it's a little different in today's age in that kids don't just commit. Some kids like to do the production, and those things don't just get done right away. It takes a little while to do those things. And that's why we've seen some guys in the past, like Holden Stace, went public well after, he had silently committed to Notre Dame. And I think some of these kids want to get home. And again, this has been an overwhelming month. We have to understand, this has been such a weird month, and really don't know how it was going to go. I just knew it was going to be weird. And we're seeing that. And we're seeing these visits are way more impactful than maybe we thought they'd be. And some of these kids, it's been such an overwhelming month. Like, I got to get to all these schools. And some kids are doing like midweek trips, in between weekend trips, and all this different stuff. And it's like, I think a lot of these kids are just overwhelmed. And they're like, I want to take a step back. And then July is going to allow them. So I would imagine that we're going to start to see that stuff fall. Like maybe, we're the 25th now. So maybe like end of next week, around July 4th, and then that week, if certain players haven't jumped into class by, like, let's say the weekend after July 4th, I'm going to get nervous about those players. I'll be honest with you. And try to get up to these questions here. Okay. All righty. Chief Brody, might be hard to do, but I would absolutely love a post-game Q&A show. Might have quite a bit of negativity, but being able to react and discuss together would be awesome. So, Chief, just so you know, we are going to try to do something post-game. I think there's a couple things that we're going to talk about, and we'll eventually kind of, when we kind of hammer down our couple options, we'll reach it out to you. But it basically revolves around this. There's two ways we can go. Number one is we try to set something up at Notre Dame pretty soon after the game, 20, 30 minutes after the game. We listen to the post-game press conference, get a couple, the game observations out. But then pretty quickly after the game, we get a room and we do it in there. So that way, because the thing, and Vince likes this option because it's like it's still fresh and still kind of raw, and everybody's kind of, the emotions are going to be high. And I kind of like that idea too, but that's going to have a time limit on it, because we can't be at Notre Dame but for like an hour and a half after the game or so, right? Then they kick us out. The other option is that we do it like maybe closer to an hour after the game, which gives us time to finish our work, but then get to our cars and drive home and do it from our studio, so to speak. So we're not sure which direction we're going to go. I think a part of that's going to depend on y'all, but when we get closer to kind of hammering out the details and even finding out if doing it right afterwards is an option, then we'll do it. But we're definitely going to do a post-game show. I just don't know how quickly that show is going to be able to go live, whether it's like pretty soon afterwards or if it's, like an hour afterwards. We'll have to see about that. And we're going to continue to discuss that and dive into that. So that's where I'm at. Oh, Corey D. Brian, who was the greater, more impactful band, Nirvana or Metallica? I have no idea. I don't really listen to that kind of music, so I couldn't tell you. I mean, on my generation, it's Nirvana, just because I knew a lot of those grunge kids in high school that listened to Kurt Cobain and were always like sad. But that just wasn't really my kind of. I don't know. I probably couldn't tell you a Metallica song. I know what their shirts look like because I grew up in Ohio and people in the 80s, and there was always Metallica shirts around, but that was never my kind of my cup of tea, to be honest with you. All right, here we go. Domer Grizz, I'd love to see Avery Davis throw from a trick play this year, but did I hear you right that you want to see him as the only QB on the field at times? Why is that better than a Tyler Buckner package? I have always said I want to see a Tyler Buckner package. And did I hear you say I want to be in the QB at times? Yeah, I do. I would like to see that. It's not a package. It's just kind of like you come out there for 2 or 3 plays and you do that, because the difference between that wrinkle and having Tyler Buckner on the field is when Tyler Buckner's on the field, you're still thinking that's a quarterback that can throw and run. If you got Avery Davis lined up on the field, there might be some coaches who didn't know that kid played quarterback his first year at Notre Dame. And so you put him on the field, and now he has more weapons to that can distract the defense, as opposed to if you have Jack Cohn backside, they're not respecting that. You're not throwing a bubble screen to Jack Cohn, right? It's more just a trick play kind of thing, or it's just something to get teams thinking. I have also said that I'd like to see a Tyler Buckner package, even if he's not the number 2 quarterback and Drew Pine is the guy that you'd put in if your quarterback is down for a period of time. I still think if Tyler Buckner shows himself capable of lining up and being able to execute certain concepts, I'd love to see a Tyler Buckner package. I don't think you would have to have one or the other, and I've never advocated for one or the other. I've said both. I'd like to see both. So hopefully that clears that up, because that's not something that I would say. So Nolan says, here's one I have been wondering for years. Other than the suspension, what kept Golson from succeeding? His arm talent coming out of high school was impressive, had a cannon attached to his shoulder. Well, I think the suspension had a big part of it, to be honest with you. I think the suspension led to him spending more time with George Whitfield, which then led to him thinking he was a certain type of quarterback that he was not. I think that was the issue. And I think another thing that hurt Everett is Everett was not a kid that had ever lost much, right? And he was a kid that, I think won a state title in basketball. As a point guard, won a state title in football, led his team to a victory over Jadeveon Clowney's team in high school in the state championship game. Then obviously had the success he had at Notre Dame. And I think when the wheels kind of came off in 2014, he didn't handle it well. And, I've been critical of Brian Kelly over the years for, times he talks to the quarterbacks too much and he gets on them too much. And then sometimes it's not the same message that the other coaches are giving. Brian Kelly was as kid gloves as possible as you could be with Everett Golson, at least in games. And I just don't think Everett handled adversity all that well, both in his life and then in football. I think that's really a big thing. And as a quarterback, you have to have that. Whereas Tommy Rees is the exact opposite. Tommy Rees could throw 2 interceptions in a row and it didn't faze him at all. He just, whatever, I'm going to keep throwing. Everett it got in his way, got in his head. And I think that's really what hurt him. Ben Elijah says, it's a good question. With the new offensive line this year, do you think Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree have another good year, or will they suffer from the lack of experience at the offensive line? So I don't think the offensive line is going to have the lack of experience that maybe we're thinking. You got Jarrett Patterson's a 2-year senior. Josh Lugg has 9 starts under his belt. They now have Kane Madden, who's a 2-3-year starter at Marshall. Zeke Correll started a couple games. And the guys that are also battling are mostly juniors. If Blake Fisher's inexperienced, obviously, if Rocco Spindler starts over those other guys, it's either poor development or he's just that good, or maybe a combination of both. And so, yeah, there's some inexperience there, but I don't think we should have this horrible offensive line at Notre Dame this year. I don't think that we should see that from them. I think they should still at least be good. That's just kind of how I look at it. I think this should still be a good enough offensive. I mean, nobody's thinking that Alabama lost 3 starters off their offensive line, 1 first-round pick, and a guy that was picked right just outside the first round, both taken before any of Notre Dame's linemen were taken. Is anyone expecting they're going to have a huge drop-off? No, they're not. Notre Dame shouldn't either. They should still be able to run the football. The thing I'm hoping for is that we see more spread stuff. So that's why I've said do RPOs, spread the field, take advantage of all the athletes you have a receiver, because what that's going to do, Ben, is that now spreads the defense out too. So if you're going more 11 personnel, or even in some of your 12 personnel, I thought I spilled a box of Cheez-Its. I thought it was my drink. I'm starting to get a little animated. But if you're spreading the field, even from your 12 personnel, putting your tight ends out, using Michael Mayer all around, you're spreading your receivers out, you're putting, maybe you go 2 backs, put one of your backs outside. What that does is that forces the defense to make a choice. Do you stay condensed and play the run, knowing that they've got perimeter playmakers that you can get the ball out to, or do you widen your defense? Well, if you widen your defense, that's less players in the box, or guys that maybe have to come from depth to get into the box. Well, now you have backs that are capable of making people miss or turning little creases into big plays. And now you don't necessarily need a great offensive line. You needed a great offensive line last year because everybody knew what you were going to do. I mean, they were so 12 and 13 personnel driven that teams could put just 9 guys in a box, and they were still able to run the ball effectively. That's why I say, spread it out, get guys out of the box, run more RPO. So then if they do try to get a little bit, peeking into the backfield too much, your quarterback's pulling and getting that ball outside, and you're using Lawrence Keys and Avery Davis and Kyron and Chris Tyree and Braden Lindsey and Xavier Watts. You're using those guys more in the pass game to take advantage of that. And then if you're able to hit some plays out there and move the chains and do some things effectively, now there's more creases on the inside because teams have had to spread out. And here's an example. So if your tackle's here and you've got a linebacker that's kind of splitting the difference between your tackle, and then you've got a receiver over here, he may be close enough to kind of fold inside over here to your tackle and maybe make some plays. But if you're really hitting that guy with some bubble screens and he has to take a couple steps further out to defend that, or if he stays in that spot, but he's kind of got to stay put and respect the bubble action by the back or by the slot in an RPO, that's the difference between him being able to get inside to Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams or him not being able to get to, right? So that pause or that 2 steps out, that's the difference between him closing and making a tackle for a 5 or 6 yard gain, or him not getting there in time and it's gone. So that's why I say, maybe there may be some more TFLs this year, but I think we're going to see some more home runs too and some more big plays too, if they're willing to spread it out. If they think they're just going to go 12 and 13 personnel all game and run the same offense they ran the last year, this offense is going to be it's going to do well against the teams that stink, but they're not going to score enough to do that. Michael says, my father used to say this about being on campus. Michael, Notre Dame is my mecca. Loved going to games with him. That's awesome. My dad and I didn't get a chance to go to a Notre Dame game until I was an adult, had gotten out of coaching. It was like 2 years after I'd gotten out of coaching, actually. And we went to a 2007 game against USC, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, that's been and they've been back for other games, and it's a lot of fun being at games with my parents and my dad especially because he was a Notre Dame fan. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Brent Nichols, when is Jalen Sneed announcing his commitment? Is Oregon really a player? He doesn't have a date set. I would imagine that we will, see a decision from him no later than early July is what I would imagine. And is Oregon a player? Sure, they're a player, but I really like where Notre Dame is at in that one. Okay. Oh, boy. Thomas Walsh, you touched my heart here, Thomas. I saw John Elway in 1982 at Stanford against Oklahoma when I was 12 years old. I got to see John Elway play once in person, and they got killed. It was in 1998 against Miami. Remember that year that Denver started 13-0, and then they lost to the Giants, and then they played Miami on Monday Night Football? I didn't know this at the time, but they kind of had a feeling that they were going to have to play Miami again in the playoffs, so they went super – conservative, and Notre Dame got beat. It's the only time I saw John Elway play live. Isn't that disappointing? But you got to see him at Stanford. And I have a friend, Tony, who talks about that Stanford-Oklahoma game all the time. He's like, Elway single-handedly beat them. Ted Irish says he saw Reggie Bush in 2005. Now, if you're joining late, this goes back to a question earlier that we were asked about who's the best player you saw live. And so that's what people are asking about, mentioning. Sid Irish said he saw Reggie Bush in 2005 versus Fresno. He was nasty. Is that the game he put the ball behind his back? I remember he had that great juke on the sideline against Fresno. He dominated that because Fresno was battling USC for a minute that game. And then Reggie just took over in the second half. I remember that game. Wasn't that the game where he kind of went behind his back? I can't remember if that was that game or not, but that was such a great, great play. All right, Chili. Brian, on getting the running backs more involved in the pass game, Clay High Product John Gruden loves the 2Y banana. How many plays could Notre Dame use similar plays? So, Chili, I think they can do a lot of things like that, and obviously that's like a corner route type of situation. But I think with Kyron Williams especially, I think the fact that Kyron can play like a receiver. I mean, let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame, got a graduate transfer from some Jerome Bettis' twin or something like that, right? And they were hurting at slot, and you're like, let's move Kyron to slot. He could be an every down slot. There's no doubt in my mind. And it's like I felt about Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's a great running back. But if Christian McCaffrey wanted to just be a slot receiver, he could do that. There's no question. And I think Kyron has some of that because he can run routes. He can catch the ball downfield. A lot of backs can catch the ball really well, like 5 yards and in. But you start getting that ball downfield, and it's a different coordination. It's just tracking the balls different. Not every guy can track the ball downfield. That's why you'll see backs that usually have good hands, but when they got to catch a wheel route down the field, it's kind of like it's like a little bit of a trying to catch a fly ball on a windy day, but the guy catches the short stuff so well. You just don't have a lot of experience about that. Kyron does. He can track the deep ball really well. So I would love to see them use him in different ways. Now, part of that is like using him outside, but your comment about the 2Y banana thing, that's a play where you're actually using him to run routes out of the backfield at times as well, which could certainly be impactful. I don't know if that's, Notre Dame's not a West Coast offense, so it's not necessarily part of what they do. And obviously David Shaw still runs it, but concepts like that where you're using him out of the backfield absolutely can do. LSU had a really good play like that against Alabama for a touchdown where they kind of ran the coverage off, and then it's almost like a scissors concept. And they ran a post, but it was actually Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming out of the backfield on the corner route, and it went for a touchdown. It's really, really well designed play. I think stuff like that is certainly what they're doing. And if you don't know what Chili's talking about, type in 2Y banana or Y banana into a YouTube search, and there'll be all types of videos that come up. And you'll see David Shaw talking about it, John Gruden talking about it. John Gruden used to always talk about it all the time when he was doing his quarterback thing, which is a lot of fun. Joseph Salvatore, love the show, Brian. Thank you, Joseph. Hearing anything on the 3 offensive linemen from Wisconsin, Bruner, Hinsman, and Schrouth, and where Notre Dame stands with them going into the last big official visit weekend. So as of right now, Notre Dame's not looking great with any of them based on what I've heard, but I haven't heard Notre Dame is still in it from what my latest intel. Now, I know it's being reported by others, and I'm not saying that those people are wrong. I'm just saying I haven't gotten that same intel from them about them. But I don't think Notre Dame is in strong a position with Hinsman as I thought they would be coming out of that visit. He said all the right things to me, but it just sounds like maybe Notre Dame isn't in the strong place that they were beforehand. Schrouth, again, I haven't got anything new on Schrouth in a couple weeks. And so I know what's being reported, but I don't have anything to add to what's being reported. And Bruner, I've never thought Notre Dame was gonna have a shot with, and we just haven't seen Notre Dame close the deal. I mean, they haven't closed the gap with any offensive lineman. They just haven't moved the needle at all. And I mean, if you think about it, if anything, they've fallen back with a lot of these kids. I mean, Jake Taylor didn't work, didn't go well. I mean, they weren't a player coming out of that visit. The Wisconsin kids visit, and then like within a week, less than a week actually, it seems like they're out of it with all 3 of them. So this is a bad sign that hopefully Brian Kelly can look at and say, what's going on here? What are we doing or not doing that we need to adjust and fix? Thomas Walsh adds more to that. I saw Elway at Stanford versus Oklahoma in 1982 when I was 12. Unreal athlete. My dad, Irish class of 1962, told me this could be the greatest of all time. You just saw something, kid. Never forget that. Yes, I agree. Liam Gaming says if Walker's 40 time did go from 4.46 to 4.41 and 50% of that speed increase translates to the field, is that a tremendous difference? I know a lot. Yes. Look, if 4.41 speed translates to the field for Amorian Walker, he's going to go way up on my board, way up. Because one thing I did talk about, if you go back and read my eval of him that I did back at the time, is I really like him as a route runner. He's raw, but he's got some potential. He tracks the ball really well. I mean, he's got really good ball skills. I don't see that speed. I don't see really a quick-footed athlete, and I don't see it in a kid that's really skinny kid. So the skinny part still needs to get filled out, but he's looking like he's filling out now. But if that speed goes from 4.56 to 4.41 with his route running potential and his ball skills, absolutely, you make a huge difference. Yeah, so could that be a tremendous difference? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope that's what we see. Josh Kalasa says, with all the talk about Blake starting at left tackle and with him being a freshman, will he have enough gas in the tank to play an entire game? If not, would you have some kind of rotation with him? That's a very good question, Josh. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. Neither does Notre Dame. What I will say is this. From everything I've heard, Blake is putting in serious work to be in the best shape of his life. I've heard nothing but great things about him in regards to the work ethic he's putting in. And so, I mean, that's a good sign. Now, I would like to see them maybe have some sort of rotation where maybe a couple series you put somebody else in. I just don't know who that guy would be. I mean, that's the thing is the tackle depth chart right now is not looking great. Do you get Tosh Baker in at times? But I think the other thing too is early on when you've got a big lead, you've got to develop your depth chart at left tackle. Even if Blake's a stud and you think he's going to be great, what if he goes down? You need to figure out who your left tackle is going to be. So I would do things where maybe in the third quarter you take Blake out late in the third quarter, you're up 38-7 on somebody, you put somebody else in, and that's another way you can kind of save some of his reps. But the other way that you can do that too, Josh, is we don't always just focus on the reps in games. The other part of this too is if you've got some young guys that are gassed, you don't cutting 10, 20 reps off of their game action is not going to necessarily move the needle. What you need to do is you need to start cutting maybe 20, 30 reps off of them as they kind of get to the middle of the season in practice. So, maybe we're going to work a little extra Tosh at left tackle today and take some of that burden off of Blake. So we'll limit his reps a little bit, and then that'll get Tosh some first team reps, and then maybe that'll get like John Alt or Joe Alt or some of those other younger linemen, Caleb Johnson or something like that. Maybe Michael Carmody. Maybe get him a couple of extra second team reps that he otherwise wasn't getting. So I think it's really then is where you're going to see where you can save his give him a little bit of a refill of gas, so to speak. It's more about in practice than it is cutting 10, 12 reps off of his what he does on Saturday. Ladarius Martin, our Bama fan, is back in here. Hey, my Notre Dame buddies, roll tide roll. Welcome back to the show. Ladarius. We will treat you with respect as long as you treat with respect, buddy. But I appreciate you coming back. Being with us, buddy. I appreciate that very much. All right. Let me see if I can get some questions here. All right, we got I just got booted out. Here we go. You find some good questions. Brian Meadows, I named my puppy Fisher and I got fur babies too. That's awesome. I love that. We actually, Brady was our first. And our two dogs we have now, Rita and Sadie, we did not name after any Notre Dame players, partly because they're girls. And I just felt like, some of those names, I like giving people names. So like, I didn't want to name one of them Rocket or something like that. Plus I kind of felt like, I don't know if that'd be a great boy's name, but no, Sadie and Rita are two girls now. And I love them dearly. They're absolutely adorable dogs. All right, let me see here. I'll have to show a picture of them here one of these days, but let me see if I can got one here because I absolutely adore these girls. See if I can find a picture of Rita and Sadie that I can share with you guys and gals. Let's see here. Okay. I got a little super chat down here. Corey D, thank you so much for the super chat, Corey. I appreciate that. Appreciate that very, very much. Let's go back to find some questions here. Ladarius, I don't remember him being a target for Notre Dame. Brian Meadows, I was born in Lima and I'm 42. So what was it like living? So what was it like living there? I moved there when I was 2. So if you moved there when you were 2, then we lived in Lima at the same time. I lived in Lima from 1978 till 1993. And I went to Bath elementary and middle school. So be curious, kind of how long you were in there. But I loved growing up, but it was more so, I didn't know any better. Driving to 30 minutes to Walpock to go to the Neil Armstrong Museum was like a trip. My mom and I were joking about this recently, but driving to Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was like an hour and a half away to go to the zoo was like a vacation thing. The world was just different back then. It wasn't so easy to just travel all the time. But I loved growing up, but that was because I had a ton of family there. And, that was, I had a great childhood. I had loving parents and great family. And I had like 6 parents growing up, because I had my mom and dad, but I also had like my aunt Dixie she had 3 daughters. She didn't have any boys. And my Uncle Marty had 2 daughters and now he has 4, but he didn't have any boys. So like, I was kind of like the son for all my aunts and uncles too, that didn't have boys. So I enjoyed Lima. Now, I don't think I would have liked it as I got older. And as I got older, I appreciated being able to move to Virginia Beach and all the opportunities that provided. But I enjoyed it as a kid, but I didn't really necessarily know any better. William J. Stites says, is Notre Dame going to have a top 10 offense next year? I think you're talking about the 2022 season. I don't know if they'll have a top 10 unit. I don't think they necessarily need a top 10 unit. I think what they need to have, William, is I think they need to at least have a top 20 unit, top 15 to top 20. I think Notre Dame's in a situation where they're good enough defensively that I don't think they have to score 40 points a game to win. I don't think it's necessarily like that. 49 points a game to win, like some teams do, I don't think it's necessarily like that. I think it's more of a situation where they just have to be able to score 30 when it matters or 34 when it matters. I think that's really more for me where it is. It's more about that. It's more about, get to 40, right? And I think part of it too is get points on the board early. So in some of those games against Toledo and Purdue, you can develop players. You get guys some reps. You can get your quarterback in early enough to where you can still throw the football. So I do have this picture here I want to show to you. So we talk about my girls a lot, but this is Sadie and Rita. And this is how my wife dresses them up on game days. It's beautiful. So that's Sadie and Rita. All right. Rita is the one on the left. She is the coonhound. And then Sadie is the one. Sadie is the one on the right. If you'll notice, she does not have a paw sticking out on the left side right there because she only has 3 legs. She was a rescue. And the day that we got her, we were not supposed to keep her. We were just supposed to be foster parents. And she had just had her left leg amputated. And by the time we got her healthy, I didn't want to give her up. So we kept her and then stopped being foster parents because they were both foster dogs and we failed fosters and we kept them both. And I told my wife, We are not doing fostering anymore with dogs because otherwise we're going to end up with 20 dogs because if they stay in my house more than a week, I don't want to give them up. So those are our girls. So when I talk about Rita and Sadie and you talk about my daughters, those are it. That's what they look like. And I just love the mohawk that Sadie has there. It's hilarious. My wife likes to like mess with and do stuff with it. I'm like, hey, don't do that. But that's our girls. So if you hear us talking about it, that's who we're talking about. Okay. Let's see here. John Wynn says, are you going to be on the pregame and postgame show before and after the game? Because I love to be part of this. John, so we will definitely do a postgame show. I don't know if we're going to do a pregame show. What Vince and I have talked about is maybe doing a pregame show on the days where Notre Dame has night games. So like the USC and the North Carolina games, because we get there 2-3 hours early on the afternoon games, and then it's like I'm doing a show instead of spending time with my wife. That's not really ideally where I want to be, because Saturday mornings I like to spend some time with my wife and my dogs and just kind of relax a little bit. So I can do that and still do a pregame show on the night games. We can't really do that on the 2:30 and 3:30 games. So plus it's really hard to do that at night, and so that's kind of where I go. All right, Sean, this is awesome. Sean Longacre says, my Father's Day gift was an Irish Breakdown shirt, hat, and mug. Can I get a shout out to my wife, Molly, and my children, Abby, Nate, Allie, Max, and Henry? You absolutely can. That is awesome. I thought about doing something like that for Father's Day, but I just kind of feel bad, like pushing that stuff, like beyond just, people being in this thing. But the fact that they saw that and did that, I mean, that number one, obviously you've talked to your family about Irish Breakdown. So I love that. But yeah, big shout out to Molly, big shout out to Abby, Nate, Allie, Max, and Henry for getting your dad and your husband some Irish Breakdown gear. So that's awesome. So you can kind of sit there on game day. You got your Irish Breakdown hat. You got an Irish Breakdown shirt. Probably it was a Gap closers. You got your mug. You can have whatever you want in that mug. That's awesome. Congrats. I hope you enjoy them. I hope that they came out good. I hope they fit well, and I hope you really enjoy them. No question about it. Let's see if we get some more questions here. Brian Meadows, this is a good one. What quarterback is a comparison to Tyler Buckner? Okay, so I'm talking more style of play here, Brian. Not that I'm saying he's going to be as good, but style of play. I think he honestly reminds me a lot of Deshaun Watson. I think that's probably the comparison I would do, where he can, Deshaun, like in 2015, Deshaun was a dynamic runner. He went for over 1,000 yards. 2016, he didn't run as much. He could beat you from the pocket. He could beat you on the run. He could beat you moving around with his arm. He could beat you any kind of way, and then he could obviously make progressions and read the defense. I think that probably be style of play wise. That's probably my closest comparison. I think Deshaun had a stronger arm than Tyler had. I think Tyler's a little bit more of a dynamic athlete than Deshaun was, but that very similar. I think that's the style of play that I think best fits him, in my opinion. Doug asks, why is it that we've not had a pro-style quarterback under BK? Is it our recruiting or the style offense we run? I think they've had several pro-style quarterbacks under BK. I mean, if you're talking style of play, I mean, Dane Chris was a pro-style quarterback. Tommy Reese was a pro-style quarterback. I think Deshaun Kaiser was a pro-style quarterback. And yeah, I mean, I think they've had several. And I mean, Drew Pine was recruited to be a pro-style quarterback. He's not a runner or a guy that's going to move around. I just think that's just kind of the guys they've gone after. And I personally am okay with that. I like guys that can move around and make plays. I mean, I think the way Notre Dame's offense works, Doug, is they can get a pro style guy, they can get a drop back guy. I think they've tried to recruit plenty of drop back guys. They just missed on them. They just got beat by other schools for them. They wanted Kyle Allen coming out of high school and just didn't get him. So there's Gunnar Keel was a drop back quarterback. They signed Gunnar Keel too. He was a drop back quarterback. Or a pro-style quarterback. So I think they've had them. Those guys haven't been the ones that primarily stepped into starting roles. I think the run-throw guys have been a little bit more dynamic at this point in time. Corey D, prediction. Who is our starting quarterback at Ohio State in 2022? I don't really have a prediction on that. As I said earlier, the thing to a different type of question, Corey, I won't be shocked if it's Drew Pine, but if I'm kind of what would be the best case scenario? The best case scenario is Tyler Buckner taps into his full potential and he's a starting quarterback. I mean, he is the highest ceiling quarterback they have on the roster. There's no question about it. All I've said is if Drew Pine beats him out, I'm fine with that too, because Drew Pine's a very, very good football player. All right, let's get down to some more questions. All right, Sid Irish says, Brian, best green jerseys. Mine is 1993 Sugar Bowl versus Florida. Bring them back. So here's my question, Sid. Do you believe that because of the way the game played out, or because you actually thought they looked the best? I mean, if you're talking about the best moment of the green jerseys, for me in my lifetime, it's the same game. It's the Sugar Bowl against Florida, because it was unexpected. Everybody thought Florida was going to kill Notre Dame that year, and then Notre Dame just ran over them in the second half. And so, yeah, I get that. But as far as like the look, I loved the green jerseys in 2015 against Boston College. I thought the Fenway game, those were huge, huge. I thought they looked awesome. But of course, the game didn't play out that well, and so I think that kind of factored into maybe why some people didn't. And they didn't look great on TV, but I saw them in person, and they were really, really sharp. Ladarius, our Bama fan, has a question. He says, "Who is Notre Dame's most hated rival? Is it USC? Because us Alabama fans, we dislike Auburn but hate Tennessee." I think for Notre Dame, USC is Notre Dame fans Auburn. Michigan is Notre Dame fans Tennessee. Notre Dame fans, tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. I don't think Notre Dame fans don't like USC, but I don't think most don't hate USC. I think the rival that I would say that about is Michigan. I hate Michigan. I'm not gonna lie to you. I hate Michigan football. I don't know many Notre Dame fans who don't hate Michigan football. And it's only gotten worse in recent years because of who they've had at head coach and some other off the field things that have happened. Notre Dame played Michigan and they canceled the series, and Michigan played like the chicken dance song, and so of course then the next time they played, Notre Dame beat the ever living mess out of them. So it is what it is. But I hate Michigan. I'd be curious if other Notre Dame fans feel the same way as far as that. So, all righty. Chief Brody says, my first Notre Dame game was actually 2008 at Michigan State when I was 11. My uncle was in the MSU marching band, so my grandma brought me to see Javon Ringer run riot on us. That's kind of like my USC game in 2007, Brian. It was not a great experience. Brian Meadows says, I listen to all the Notre Dame podcasts, and this one is the best by far. You're killing it. Keep up the great work. I really appreciate that, Brian. Really do. And I know this is a great market with a lot of great talent. So for you to say that, I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to try to answer that question here from about Notre Dame and USC. Notre Dame does have the advantage over USC by quite a bit. It is 47-37-5. So Notre Dame has a 10-game advantage over USC, and that's actually that used to be a lot worse. USC had an 8-game winning streak when Pete Carroll was here. So from 2002 to 2009, USC beat Notre Dame 8 straight times. Since Brian Kelly has arrived, Notre Dame has won, 7 out of 10. So Brian Kelly has beaten USC 7 out of 10 times, including 4 in the last 5 and the last 3. So Notre Dame has controlled that matchup. And Sid Irish is correct. Notre Dame, Lou Holtz dominated USC. Okay, and this is a great question. This is very well done right here. Who leads the Notre Dame Alabama series? Notre Dame leads that one 5-3, but that's been closing lately, obviously the last 10 years. All righty. Let's see these questions here. Trying to find some more questions as we wrap up the show. And before you leave, we're going to wrap up here really soon. We've got the last couple questions. Before you leave, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to what we're doing here. Share this with your friends. Share this with people that you know. I'd really, really appreciate that, of course. And we were trying to help this thing grow. So you guys are all the OGs of this group, but we want to bring in more. So if you have Notre Dame friends and family, or if you're a student at Notre Dame, share our channel with more people. And like I said, we're always accountable, and we'll always ask questions and things like that. And we appreciate everybody being a part of what we're doing. Okay, let's get here. So Thomas answered that question. He said, I hate Michigan the most. Worst fan base around. Don't like SE, but respect them and their fans. Respect nothing about Michigan. I was born in LA, surrounded by SE folks. Many friends are alums. Yeah, so I was really curious what you thought, Thomas, because I know you live out there, or at least you did for a long time. And a lot of people answering Chief Brody, Michigan, easily the most delusional fan base. Absolutely. Oh, this is good. So we're talking about my dogs, and William J. Stice says, I always name my dogs after songs. Layla from Eric Clapton and Rigby from the Beatles. That's good. That's good. Okay. Sid says, we named our dogs after Roman emperors, Nero, Claudius, Julius, and et cetera for golden retrievers. That's it always fascinates me how people name dogs, because everybody's got like their different way of doing it. So that's great. A lot of people, Ladarius, I think this is answering your question right here. Some Notre Dame fans won't even put the M there, right? I mean, that's great. So here we go. Irish Mike asks, how much longer before we start considering coaching changes at O-line and receiver? I think if things don't go well for Coach Alexander, if he doesn't develop the receiving core this year and he doesn't do well in recruiting, then yeah, I could see them making a move there. I hope that he bounces back and does a good job. I really like Del Alexander. I think he's a good guy. I would love to see him bounce back in the recruiting trail, get Tobias Merriweather, get CJ Williams, get out early and maybe get some early 2023 kids, maybe pull off an upset and get Jaylen Brown, get Carnell Tate. And then there's no more criticism, right? And I'd love to see him start coaching the players better, because I think he's someone I'd like to see work at Notre Dame. I think he's a good guy. He just has to get better at developing younger players, has to get better making sure he's teaching the technique and developing the whole roster more than he has. And you can hear my dogs now upstairs. So apparently they're not being they're usually upstairs with my wife, so I apologize with that. Let's see here. Last couple of questions here, we're going to wrap up. Revolver 6238 says, is Ashton Craig really up to over 280? That would be great if true. So this is coming directly from his coach. They said he weighed in at Notre Dame at 283 pounds. And I saw pictures of him from the visit, and it's not a bad 283 pounds. So yes, he is up to 283 pounds, which is good. Chief Brody, I think we answered this now. Let's put it this way. If USC and Michigan played, I'd want USC by 1 billion points. So yes. Kyle Dolan says, I hate them both. And so does Doug. So I it's always going to be different. So I'm going to get the last couple questions before we wrap up here, and I got to get going. The show has gone really long. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody being part of this with these last couple questions, and then we'll get out here. D-Rock, obviously, make sure everyone, before you exit, hit the like button, hit the share button, and reminder, hit the notification bell. Everybody have a great weekend. Ladarius, appreciate you being part of it. And we're going to do some stuff where we're going to do kind of previews of the season. So we'll have some Alabama conversation coming up at some point in time. Corey D, I'm from Michigan, live in Michigan. My Michigan friends are insufferable. A half title since World War II. It was beautiful. I absolutely agree. RP, hey, Coach, great stuff. Thank you, RP. We stole a couple great LBs from Michigan this year. Who can we steal next? It's a good question. I'm hoping it's Dante Moore. I'm hoping it's 2023 quarterback Dante Moore. That'd be a pretty great one. Sid Irish, was Ed Warner a good coach in Notre Dame? Yeah, he was a good coach in Notre Dame. He did a good job. Was he as good as Harry Hiestand? No. He wasn't as good of a recruiter as Harry Hiestand either, but Coach Warner was a good dude, coached well. I think they had – and he took over an offensive line that was a hot mess under Charlie Weiss. I mean, the last couple of years under Coach Weiss was just bad. And I thought he did a solid job. The thing there was he ran a certain type of scheme that fit Kelly. They were a pin and pull team and things like that. Kelly wanted to go to more power football, inside zone, stuff like that. And that wasn't really what Coach Warner did. And I also think Coach Warner wanted to be the offensive coordinator when he got rid of Charlie Molnar, and Coach Kelly didn't want to make him that, and he shouldn't have. I mean, it was the right decision by Coach Kelly. So I think that factored into it as well, and that's what led to Harry Hiestand coming over. So yeah, there's that. So anyway, and I think that is going to be it. That's going to be it for today's show. So I appreciate everybody being part of the show today. Thanks so much for the great questions. I think this was probably the longest show we've ever had, and it was nothing but questions. So I appreciate all that. Everyone that gave a super chat, thank you so much for your support. Again, shout out to Sean's wife, Molly, and his kids for getting him some Father's Day gear from Irish Breakdown. If you are interested in that gear, You can see the link below to our online store. My wife created that. And of course, she designed the logo and all this kind of stuff for Irish Breakdown. And so it's not Father's Day anymore, but you can still get the gear, obviously, and for birthdays. And obviously, you need to make sure you're loaded up on it before the first game of the season. So now you can check that out. Make sure you subscribe to irishbreakdown.com's free newsletter. If you are listening via podcast, please give us a 5-star review. And as always, check out irishbreakdown.com. So everybody have a great rest of your day, a phenomenal weekend, and I will see all of you again on Monday. Have a good weekend.